You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Did you ever wonder what it would be like to be one of the last people on Earth?
We're talking ghost town!
Who would you see?
There's nobody. There's nobody. Ah!
What would you do?
Hey, I'm sorry if the end of the world makes me a little nervous.
Where would you go?
The stars are up ahead!
Somewhere between the dimension of life and death.
How many made it?
Just you, I'm afraid.
This is Cloud 86. We have a light.
Say again?
Somewhere between the unexpected and the unexplained are the forces beyond human understanding.
I feel like I'm about to be caught.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on. Invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we have embraced democracy and had you guys vote for the next episode. So if you want some of that sweet power, join the sleaze.
That's right. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for, I don't know, another year's about to end, though. There's like 170 plus bonus episodes, as well as 50 plus of our bonus transmissions where we talk about new release genre films all year long. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, we would recommend doing that. And speaking of which, we had a bunch of people to give their shout outs today. We had Ave sign up at $5 a month. We had Palm Trender, Robert Carney, Vivi Tran, Louis Uzarowitz, Rolando Denesi, Isaiah Black, Cade, Arrow Zeppelin, Fortius, Suzanne Kearney, Tyler Gruthison, Kui, Hassan.
Tough names this week.
You guys are fucking me up today. Hassan Kareem, who actually signed up at the annual tier for an entire year of the show at a bit of a discounted rate monthly. So thanks to Hassan. We had Scott sign up at $5 a month. Blurb. That was a good one. That was an easy one.
Nice.
Ryan Greenlaw, Dylan, and Penelope M. They got a little bit easier as we went along there. Thanks so much to you folks for signing up. Hope you're all enjoying those bonus episodes. We appreciate that support.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you were listening on either one of those platforms, and I can see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we appreciate that support as well. And then the last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you guys can think of, and you freaks have thought of a lot of stuff. You have bought notebooks, pillows, hoodies, coffee mugs. If you are interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have had special guests Evan and Ian on from the Jokermen podcast for a very special episode where we discussed a pairing of depressed 70s revisionist westerns about friendship being corroded by capitalism that were serenaded by some legendary 1960s folk singer-songwriters that are very much in the wheelhouse of the Jokermen boys. We talked about Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller from 1971, featuring songs by Canadian legend Leonard Cohen, and we paired it with Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which had obviously not just a soundtrack by, but a pretty major supporting role by one Mr. Bob Dylan. There he was throwing knives and singing as every single character dies. You just hear him singing about it.
Oh yeah, Bob Dylan just working on that kill streak. But yeah, the music in those movies, it's pretty unbelievable the way they use Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen. It really does change like the entire perspective on how to look at a Western. and it creates a whole different mood that I haven't seen in any other Western. Really, it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. Go back and check it out. But last week over on the Patreon feed, we had a bit of fun getting into the holiday spirit with our good friend Count Orlok, everyone's favorite pale, clawed, horny, dirt and real estate enthusiast. We talked about, for the first time on this show, Nosferatu. We talked about the original 1922 film by German expressionist silent filmmaker F.W. Murnau, who was unofficially adapting Bram Stoker's Dracula, and as a result, that movie was almost lost forever due to rights issues. And we're glad that it hasn't, because the iconic early horror film imagery in that is, has gone on to define so much of what horror became, as well as obviously the Max Schreck performance in it, which kind of defined movie monsters for almost a century.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable, and it was really cool to watch them back to back. I mean, the plot beats are obviously almost identical, the way that they're delivered to you, but I do love the differences they have with Orlok or Dracula, where it's like creepy and purely dangerous, and then just with Herzog, it's just sad and lonely and desperate.
Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that.
Connection.
The other one was the remake by Werner Herzog from 1979 with Klaus Kinski in the title role. But yes, functionally they are the same movie, and Werner Herzog is very, very indebted. It's almost practically a tribute to the original silent film.
Yeah, he even has some shots that are the exact same, and at times you might think that could be just plagiarism, but I do think he uses it in his own way, and then the way he films nature, especially like those overlooming mountain shots and everything, are incredible. So there's some cool differences.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode and you are wanting to get caught up on Nosferatu fever before you go on Christmas Day, which I assume a lot of our listeners will be doing, to go and see Robert Eggers' new adaptation, I'd recommend going over to the Patreon and getting over there and listening up.
Yeah.
But moving on to this week, if Nosferatu did not quite get you into the Christmas spirit in the way that you are used to, Jamie and I are going to be having a very special holiday-themed episode this year. We've given the guests a break. We're letting them go on holiday early, and we are going to be tackling something I've been wanting to tackle for a few years. We're going to be talking about the cult B-exploitation cinema of a filmmaker named Thom Eberhardt, who in 1984 made two low-budget genre-bending movies set during the Christmas holidays in California, which, I'm sure we have I'm sure we have a lot of American listeners, probably have some California-based listeners, but for us, Christmas means snow, and it means cold, and it it does not mean what it means to people who live in Los Angeles. And Thom Eberhardt was like, I don't give a shit. LA has Christmas too.
Yeah, we've got Spirit over here too, damn it.
Yeah.
In 1984.
But it's going to happen in the background of two very different styles of genre movies. One, his post-apocalyptic action comedy movie from the perspective of essentially two teen girls living through an apocalyptic situation, called Night of the Comet, which has gone on to become quite a bit of a cult film, and I was glad to finally watch it for the first time actually over the December month, because we have the Review Cinema here in Toronto has a film print of it that they play annually, and I had just missed going to watch it. But I every time I missed it, I kept going, well, next year. I know that they're going to keep playing it. So I finally went this year, and I was like, oh, we definitely have to talk about this. And when I was like, that's what I wanted to do, what would the pairing be? I literally just looked up what his other films were, and I found out that he has another high concept, like slow burn science fiction horror film about a woman who survives a really horrific plane crash and then thinks she's being haunted by death. And I was like, well, that doesn't really sound like a Christmas film. And every review I read said that it was also set during Christmas. And I was like, sold. on Soul Survivor, also from 1984. They literally came out within like 9 months of each other, and they were both set at Christmas. And I was like, what are the chances of this? We need to do this.
Yeah, and we will get into it, but he does have an actual discernible style and kind of a love for certain shot sets. Oh yeah, the mood is really fun, especially really consistent in Soul Survivor, and then with Night of the Comet, it's like all over the place, but in a very fun way. Like even on the wiki, it's like science fiction, comedy, horror, action. Like it just has every genre across the board, basically. And he's having so much fun with it. So yeah, he is a very fun filmmaker. I'll say that. And I guess Soul Survivor, though, he takes a little more seriously, but he doesn't ever stray away from the camp or anything like that. There is a lot of fun there.
Which, by the way, I heard was not what he intended. The producers of Soul Survivor cut out some of the more tonal bending stuff, because that actually was a trait that he liked. He liked having humor in his like horror stories.
Okay, yeah, because it does, like they have moments with characters, but it still feels built into the horror elements with Soul Survivor, whereas Night of the Comet, he's just kind of bending it constantly. In almost a whiplash effect. So that is interesting. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the perhaps underrated B-movie qualifications of one Mr. Thom Eberhardt, who loved setting his genre movies during Christmas just as much as Mr. Shane Black did. So let's jump right into it. Let's kick things off. Let's talk about the sort of more cult-followed one of the two, Night of the Comet.
Age is now 10, but you will need ID. Let's be real.
It's the Night of the Comet.
What do you give me if I come back?
Texas?
Night of the Comet.
I'll be taking requests from all you teenage comet zombies.
The night the teenagers ruled the world.
Yeah!
Night of the Comet.
The burden of civilization is on us.
Fiction, isn't it?
All right, we are talking Night of the Comet, the 1984 post-apocalyptic science fiction action horror comedy written and directed by Thom Eberhardt and starring Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney as Reggie and Samantha, two Southern California Valley Girl sisters who, due to a comet triggering an extinction-level event over the Christmas holidays in L.A., become two of the last people on Earth, besides a few cannibal zombies, murderous stock boys, and some spooky underground scientists that they all get to interact with. This is obviously our first time talking about cult filmmaker Thom Eberhardt, who, from what I understand, got his start actually making like documentaries and like political stuff, and like he might have even worked for PBS for a time. I had a hard time actually nailing down exactly what his CV was before becoming a B-movie director. But Night of the Comet, I guess, came about because of Soul Survivor, which actually came about first. But he just had some friends who were like looking to produce like these independent movies, and he basically spent a lot of his spare time kind of cataloging script ideas and kind of wrote scripts on the sides. And some of them he even like researched during his time making documentaries, which is the legend goes that Night of the Comet was even stemmed from, a documentary where he was interviewing teen girls, and he had known that this movie had come out in 1983 called Valley Girl, and it was a really big hit. And he literally just asked like teen girls, they were like, how might you react if you were in like an apocalyptic situation? And he was very amused about the fact that they were kind of very lighthearted and kind of excited about it. It was like, they were like, it would be like a girl power action adventure story. And like, my only concern wouldn't be survival, but like the lack of boys to date and, all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
But we could still party in them all.
Yeah, and so he decided to kind of like make a movie that like adopted their fun perspective, because he was like, I've not seen that perspective on this particular genre. He's like, I like post-apocalyptic stories, I like zombie stories, I like these kinds of things, but wouldn't it be cool to make a movie kind of specifically for teen girls and for like a hangout perspective in that kind of way. And so as a result, he basically made the movie The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, which is him doing like the I Am Legend story. But it plays more like the last like Valley girls on Earth. And, you know, they just like, they have teen girl problems and they dance around to girls just want to have fun at the mall and also know how to take care of themselves when they get into trouble because they're army brats whose dad is in the military and he taught them how to like shoot guns and like all this stuff. He has a lot of very fun details in this movie.
Yeah, so there's those great moments where, you know, they are shooting guns, so you have that kind of post-apocalyptic danger and there's weapons and all of that. But then they'll say things like, Daddy would have gotten us an Uzi. And it's just shit like that I was really into and I had a lot of fun with. And having it be from the teenage girl's perspective does allow the movie and Eberhardt to kind of do whatever he wants with these loose genre rules and tone. It does have a whiplash effect, but because you're going purely from the perspective of a teenager who's just also trying to make this kind of fun, it makes sense to do that with your movie. And for me, I still wrestled with it a little bit because it felt like there was a lack of urgency when it comes to the danger in the movie. But it kind of, I'm still wrestling with how much that is outweighed by the campy fun of it all, you know? So, yeah, I get that. I will say the first time I had the lucky experience of my first time watching it also being in a theater with like a packed audience who was having a blast. And it was like a pretty rough, like 35 millimeter print where everyone was just like every line people were like, that is, you know, like people were hooting, people were having a great time. Yeah. And it is, to Eberhardt's credit, it plays that way. It has pauses baked into it to have like, you know, the girls are funny. The girls are charming. It's meant to be this very enjoyably weird and funny B-movie mixture of, again, you have the post-apocalyptic sort of like science fiction element of like the actual comet and the extinction level event happening. And obviously the girls living in this like completely empty LA, which then, you know, the people who survived get exposed and become almost like these zombies. And so it turns into a little bit of a survival sort of like action horror in the 80s where you get like a little bit into, you know, the girls, at one point they literally get into like a fist fight with like a homeless zombie at one point. But then there's also this quality of Eberhardt, who clearly is a pretty ambitious guy, who also throws in like this like 80s tongue-in-cheek sort of consumerism satire on the periphery of the film, and also just like this new wave pop like teen girl hangout story. And for me, while I was watching it, it kept shifting and changing gears between those movies every like 15 minutes to the point that I found it very unpredictable to be like, every time I was like, oh, you know, it's doing like a Romero zombie thing and it's really not as good as a Romero movie. It would be like, oh, we've already forgotten about that. We're doing something completely different now. Something different now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why at a certain point, it's really not like maybe the best version of any genre I just told you about, except for maybe the new wave like teen girl hangout movie, just because the two lead actors I think are really endearingly like adorable, and they're actually very fun when they get to go action star mode and do like, you know, the one little sister just constantly like chewing gum and doing one-liners while firing her Mac 10 and everything she's doing. Right. Like there's some, you know, and the way that it bends the genres is obviously having fun with. And I don't know, there was something very infectiously fun about how aimlessly it almost seems to mash these different types of movies together, just being like, oh, before we get bored, we're going to throw another thing in. So despite the fact that I kind of agree that at a certain point, the level of danger or intensity or energy never really gets to a point where you're just like, oh, this is like a suspenseful movie, or this is like a really high octane action sequence or something. It kind of maintains a certain level of stagnancy that is how seriously the girls are kind of taking their situation, and it instead blends them all, even the action elements, even the horror elements, and it really does blend them into more of like, we're trying to be a silly comedy about like how teen girls would react to being in this type of movie and how flippant they would be about it, and how, you know, how they and how flippant they would be while also being good at being in that kind of movie. That's kind of the joke of the movie.
Yeah, and I think those changes do also warrant how they're trying to distract themselves a lot of the time too, just based on what is going on. And so,
oh yeah, because it's bleak.
Yeah, exactly. So when you have like, people with a bunch of guns trying to kill you or whatever else, other scenes that we can get into when they're getting into trouble, there's another scene that immediately kind of softens that by them talking about like, their friendships that they no longer have because everybody's dead, or the boyfriends they wish they could, the dates they could go on, all that kind of stuff. And it feels as if rather than just totally undercutting all of the what you would think is more important in these genre things, it feels like they're just trying to comfort themselves in some way. So I do think that it works for a lot of it, for sure. And it does feel like all your friends are here when it comes to being a genre head. I do like that what you're saying, where it's like every 15 minutes you're kind of in a new movie in some sense, whether it be a zombie movie, post-apocalyptic, just a coming of age film, it's all there. So it feels comfortable and almost cozy in that way as well. It feels safe. And I do like that.
Well, and also kind of dorky in the way that, like, when I originally watched this, I had a weird thing with it where it felt like it took me a little while to figure out what the movie was, and it wasn't just because of the genre shifting. I was trying to figure out like what the tone was, and I was trying to understand some of the sudden swerves it was making. And I realized partway through that it was because so many people I had read who had, kind of recommended the movie, they had made a lot of John Carpenter comparisons. And I think it was specifically because of something like They Live. Like you could argue that some of that kind of, quality is in there. I mean, a little bit of make a Escape from New York, I guess you could say, for the post-apocalyptic like kind of element. But And I think that was just it, is that that was what I was expecting. I was expecting some of that more like that progression and that intensity. Yes. And I was expecting it to build and build and build, when instead, when I kind of realized, it was around the time they do the mall sequence and how quickly they go from being like in such a sad and desperate position to being like, remember the mall exists and no credit cards and no one runs it anymore. And they just start and they literally just start ripping around the mall having fun. And I went, oh, that's the tone. And it reminded me a lot more of someone like Albert Pune. Like I was thinking about more like the kind of fun he had with Cyborg and the way that he blended genres, because he was also someone who would be like, I'll never get the chance to do it again, so here's my zombie section, or here's my my Terminator section of the movie, or here's this. I'm going to do all of this over and over again, and I'm going to blend it in this very charming, colorful kind of 80s comic book kind of way, but also with just a certain level of like sincerity and likability. It doesn't entirely devolve into camp. He cares enough about the characters that he writes them to have feelings and to talk about them. And he does include stuff that's clearly exploitation in terms of genre, but he's not just tracing trends like cynically either. He is like making sure that he knows that he's passionate about these situations that these girls are getting into and the sudden swerves that he's doing. Like, it's like, I only get 10 minutes to do my zombie movie. I'm going to have fun with it. And I'm going to do a version of these events that you've not seen before. And I mean, even from the opening, when he gets to do the classic old school, like sci-fi voiceover,
the narrator,
it's almost a gag. The fact that he's just like, before recorded time, a mysterious comet like swung through orbit and it is returned. And there's one great line that he's like, the citizens of Earth would get an extra Christmas present this year. And I was like, okay. And then it also becomes a really funny joke, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they use the narrator really ever again, and they use it to set it up. And then when you get into the tone, I think a lot of this movie for me is kind of like you have to rediscover some of these gags to know that they're gags. When I was initially hearing the narrator, I was thinking that maybe, even though it is a little bit over the top, I was like, maybe this is just diving into the camp and it's still going to build into some of this the suspense that's going to build as the film goes on, like you were saying. But no, then it immediately goes like cue fun 80s pop rock song. The whole world is celebrating as it's very serious, like sci-fi horror voiceover about the end of the world possibly being nigh. And then you just get all these shots of people on Earth in LA just like partying in the streets awaiting the Comet light show, like they're waiting for the New Year's ball to drop, and they're like, woo.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking like especially now seeing the whole movie and knowing that the narration never comes up again or anything like that tone comes up again, that is a funny gag. It's just it's hard to be aware of that right away because you are getting used to all of the whiplash as you're watching the film. But again, I'm feeling like I might be being super hard on it. I'm not. I did have a lot of fun with that. It's just that it left me a bit confused for, like 3/4 of it. And then it was just like, oh, I need to accept the fact that this is just going to be a really good time, just a good time at the movies, a popcorn flick in that sense. And I don't need to be taking this so seriously. This is more about the experience from the perspective of a teenage girl trying her best to have a great time in this horrible situation
at the end of the world.
The film represents that, and I think that's awesome. And I do think, speaking on Pyun, although he, what we love about Pyun, he'd probably be more, gritty and aggressive about what he's doing. But I think and
he would do it on even less money. This was not an expensive movie. Totally. This was a $700,000 movie, but like Pyun would have done it with like $70,000.
Yeah, easily, and knocked it out of the park. But sincerity is so important, and I think that's why the film does end up working is because even when it is funny, the characters are taking everything pretty seriously. There's camp and tone and all of that.
They're funny personalities, but they don't know that they're in a funny movie.
Really. Yeah, and that is a cool thing to kind of balance, and I think they do that really, really, really well. And then it's just funny to have a setup where everyone's celebrating with the comet and everything, and then everyone gets wiped out, and you think that that's mostly going to be what is the issue, but there's just 3 more things that pop up with like zombies and then people with guns and all of that. And one of the funniest moments is when the one lead girl, her name is Reggie. She's sleeping with her boyfriend, who's a projectionist that's like trying to rip some guy off with this like duplicate film that he's trying to sell or something like that.
I think he's lending it to him to rip another print of it. So and then he has to bring it back, but he's like, you have to bring it back the next day because I have to run the film. Like, you can take it at the end of my shift after the last show, but you need to bring it back before the first shift of the next day. And then obviously the guy fucking is in a fucking apocalyptic event and doesn't bring it back.
Right. And he's just like, this guy, he's
so horrible, mad. He's so mad. He's like, this guy fucking screwed me.
And then it's so funny how quickly it turns, because you think that he's actually going to be a character maybe that you're going to get to know, and then he just opens a door and a zombie just like hits him over the head with a wrench and he's done. It's out. And that's one of the first kind of tonal shifts that it takes, that I was like, holy shit, I don't think this is going to have many rules to it. And sure enough, it doesn't.
No. And that's just it too, is that like, that's such a funny like plot, I guess you could say, but there's something so ridiculous about just like the fact that she has to respond to that like it's a normal situation, or that she has to work through that situation. And like when we meet Reggie, we do establish her as someone who is pretty tough and pretty competitive and speaks her mind. We meet her. She's the one played by Catherine Mary Stewart from The Last Starfighter, funny enough, as someone who in this sets the high scores on the lobby, like Atari arcade machines, and gets super annoyed that like someone else other than her going by DMK is getting in the top 10. She's like, fuck that shit. That's one of the first things we meet. And then we see her obviously having sleeping bag sex with this like a hustling goofball projectionist who wants her to spend the night with him in the booth rather than outside with everyone else watching the comet. In exchange, by the way, for $15 that he was going to make off of the print. That's a funny detail. When she's like, hey, what about my like $15? Don't I get like an Egg McMuffin for spending the night with you? And he's just like, well, talk to that guy. He was supposed to pay me for letting him lend the print. But it ends up actually being the thing that saves her life when the comet storm goes by and disintegrates everyone watching it outside into these piles of like red sand and clothes basically all over the LA streets, which is a cool image in and of itself, where everything is kind of like an empty wasteland and contains this like orange filter smoggy haze of like a skyline. It's just cool, low budget sort of apocalypse imagery.
It's beautiful, honestly.
Yeah, it looks really nice. And also they shot all of that imagery while like it's actual LA locations. They shot it apparently on Christmas morning, funny enough, which is why they have Christmas decorations and why I think they baked that into the concept of the movie probably.
Cool. And probably why it's so empty too, just in the sense that most people.
But that was it, is
home.
they said if we go early in the morning where no one is driving around LA, that's probably not even true anymore of downtown LA.
But I imagine just like what they really need, because most of these shots are just beautifully set up and they look fantastic, honestly. Every single landscape or cityscape shot that he gets in this, I think is gorgeous. And
yeah, all the ones of her
stuff.
escaping on the boyfriend's motorcycle and like driving through the intersections, and like the low angle shots looking up at like the reflective skyscrapers and all of this, or that one where she stops next to that abandoned car and it's like playing Christmas music still. The beautiful wide shots of every outdoor one where it's just like she looks like she's under like a red hot like heating lamp or something like that, but she's driving around like Charlton Heston does in the Omega Man or something. It's so cool.
Yeah, and LA just is, and it might just be because we're from Canada, so we have this view of Christmas where it's like, it's white snow on the ground and everything with the lights. But having the red sky represent Christmas over the Christmas decorations and everything is just a cool touch, and it does add to this apocalyptic feel. Like everything is just hotter due to an explosion or something like that. It just feels like the end of the world, and LA probably has that feeling from what I seem to see in a lot of films and all that. But anyway, yeah, it's that one shot I love is when they're on the two sisters are just sitting on their car, and it's got this like just a flat horizontal line, and you can see all the skyscrapers behind them, but it almost looks like they're elevated a little bit because they're almost parallel with like the middle of the skyscraper. It just
they're on like a bridge or like on top of one of those like parking garages that have like the top level of one or something. That's what it looks like.
It just looks great. And I imagine too, when they're setting these shots up, they just needed to get like 5 seconds where they see absolutely no life in LA and they're like, okay, we got it, move on before a car comes. But it is impressive how many they get and how good they look. And it does look, even in some sections, like there would have to be people. So they just they nailed it. I love the whole feeling it gives.
Yeah, no, the one interview that I saw with them, it was the two lead actresses. They said that it was actually pretty tough when they were getting some of those shots, because there would be like a part where even on one of the skyscrapers there would be like a window washer working in the background or something, and they were like, yeah, in the pre-CG days you couldn't just like fucking fix that up, like your shot was fucked, Yep.
It's just like one lone window washer still doing his job after the apocalypse.
Yeah, so they did put the work in to like try as best as they could to like even guerrilla style like block off traffic and stuff, which is like super illegal now, I think.
Sure. Probably was then too. They're like, but we got to make our film, baby. This is for art.
But yeah, no, it's great. It adds so much like budgetary value to the film, because it looks like they got permits to like make sure that they could get like downtown LA streets completely empty for their apocalypse. And yeah, it just makes the movie look great and gives the girls something to respond to visually, which is always very helpful.
She has a really funny reaction when she does go out for the first time, and she just goes, "Oh man, I hate when days start like this." And I thought that was one of the funniest.
It happens
lines,
all the time.
It's the apocalypse. It's such a funny thing to react that way. And I also love the design of how everyone is dust instead of blood or anything like that. It's just like they turned into
they're red dust though, which gives it which does give you like a little bit of that like gross like, oh, is this like they were bloody before but now they've been drying out all night or something. Yeah. And also they're in like their heaps of clothes, which is just, I don't know why that detail of it specifically, and like the way that when
there's that human element, like
Reggie picks up like talking about their stepmom Denise, she's like, you want to see Denise? Here's Denise. And just the way that her like sand falls out of her dress, and
it does give that human element of just like someone was here, and that's the definitive physical proof, and that it's everywhere, like every single
it's like they all were incinerated, and it's like they're ashes, right, or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a scary thought, but it also still, because it's the red dust, gives a little bit of that campy vibe where it's not full on violence. So he always finds this way to kind of balance the two so that you're still having fun and it's not totally dreadful the entire time, like the apocalypse probably should be. So I like that he's able to do that. And I do think it's fun how fast...
I was going to say, and that's... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just quick. I do think it's funny how fast society changes. Like it's pretty much the moment that it happens, they already have to deal with, like, you know, the gangs in the malls and all of this kind of you know, the zombies and everything. It's just it happens in like 30 minutes. It's like everything is what you almost think would happen over a few months' time or something like that. And I like that. They're just like, let's go for it.
Yeah. But I speaking to your point about the fact that I love that the younger sister, like, and part of the writing is kind of what takes place here is that you have an older sister who's more immediately scared, I think, by her situation. She's the one who gets into the scenario where she actually has to like fight the zombie outside that actually kills her boyfriend. She's the first person who's like starting to see the sort of morbid imagery of like what is functionally all these corpses that have been disintegrated, like just lying around the streets everywhere. She's the one who gets the first big ride through the entire LA downtown core, where she gets to see how widespread this is and how there's literally like nobody around anymore. But some of the energy that kind of keeps it in that more silly register is entirely in the writing, and it's entirely through her interacting with the younger sister, teen sister Samantha, played by Kelly Maroney, from Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Chopping Mall, who I think we talked about in Chopping Mall. But the fact that, like, when, you know, she is trying to explain to her that, like, we're the only two people, like, in the town to survive, and she like rides back to her, and she has like no idea what happened outside. And I think it's suggested that she survived because Reggie stayed the night in the steel walled movie theater, which is like a very funny detail. And
safety in film, everyone.
Yeah, and then the little sister was at home at the Comet party being hosted by their nasty, abusive stepmother who is cheating on their army father in Banana Land, and that she tries to give her the whole story about how she, you know, Reggie's going to be out all night, and look, Doris, like, I'm 18, like I can watch the Comet wherever I want, you know, you're not my mom. And you just get fucking Kelly, the physical comedy of Samantha. The way that she lazily rolls off the couch to be like, Doris, and then gets into a slapping and punching fight with her where she's like flipping across the room.
I could not believe
that interaction was what has her hide out, I think, in the steel lawn shed, which is what saves her.
Yeah. I could not believe that interaction with the stepmom. And at first, I actually missed the
audience lost her mind when she gets clocked by the mom.
Oh, it's such an escalating thing. You don't think that that's going to happen whatsoever. And they even play it off kind of cartoonishly, where when she punches her, she like flies across the room, like literally gets airtime. And it is strange to have that tone about that kind of abuse, but again, the entire film has this, so I found it to be very funny, and I think it really works as well. It doesn't feel like gross or anything like that. It's actually legitimately kind of like Three Stooges level of physical comedy in a way.
Yeah, but then also the fact that, you know, she wakes up the next morning and she's just like, oh, I think Doris was like out with Chuck last night, and, you know, she's dressed up in her cheerleader outfit, you know, getting ready for school, and she's like pouring milk into her Raisin Bran and she's chewing her gum, and then you just have Reggie like shaking her and being like, everyone is dead. And she's like, you're making me swallow my gum. And, you know, and the fact that she's just like so just out of it and kind of in like this very ditzy but, you know, very adorable kind of fashion. And you just have Reggie being the one who's like, here's Doris, here's what's left of her. And some of the gags that they set up from this character just slowly having to realize what she's experiencing. One of my favorites is the younger sister picking up the empty leash, and she's like, Muffy, like, where's the dog?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's really incredible how they use music in this, because again, it's that there are moments where you think they're they would try to create more tension. And instead they often have like 80s rock pop beats going on, or even full on like pop mainstream songs. Like during the shopping mall thing, they do Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which was obviously a massive hit. But even when they're doing the scene with what's his name? I just want to get it. Hector, the character, when he's introduced, he has a gun and he's like kind of threatening them because he's also in defensive mode and doesn't know who to trust and everything. And they're playing again like an 80s pop song. So there's still this underlying tone and feeling you get that you're supposed to be still having a good time, and this is almost the strangest meet cute that you've ever seen, you know? And
I mean, the whole movie is scored to obviously like this new wave sort of like synthy pop rock soundtrack. And I think part of that is that like part of being a teen girl in the 80s was always having the radio on. Like one of the first things the younger sister does is start blasting the radio in the kitchen, right? And you know, there's another scene where when in the mall, when the stock boys end up getting involved in a shootout with them, where they like shoot the radio to stop the music, and like the radio and how important it is to teen girls comes up a lot in this movie. And one of the only hint of there even being anyone else still alive is that the local rock radio station DJ is still blasting tunes from like that like neon lit like set that they have with like the bathroom even has like weird like neon like strips in it, like around the tile floor, around the mirror and all of that. And they go there originally for information. And I think it's so funny because they were like, they even have a line about how much they listen to the radio, and they go, he must know the news, right? Like that, they go to him because they're like, that must be a guy who knows what's going on. And then she goes, I always change the channel when the news comes on. I just look for another channel, like playing music again. Yeah. So this is like the first time the girls have ever been like, maybe we should be paying attention to politics instead of listening to like rock music.
right. Yeah. Cause it does tend to do this, like, I think they're kind of trying to romanticize everything, and that's what like pop music kind of does, in a sense, at least in this tone. So so it's played as both a gag, it's played as a reality for the characters, but then sometimes it also just plays as like the rock. There's a yearning, romantic quality to some of the rock music, and even then, you know, the girls are trying to have some, you know, still trying to have some drama and romance at the end of the world as well. So it definitely feels, it has that energetic spunk that the characters are supposed to have. Yeah, and I do think I like the consistent tone of the colors they use in this. Primarily red and purple seem to be huge. Red when they're outside in LA, and then purple and red when they're in the nightclub, which is a set that they use quite often. They kind of use that as their home base in a way. The radio station where the DJ is like operating from. It's strange because it looks so dark, and it has a bunch of almost like
it's a very funky radio station.
It does feel like a nightclub, but you're right, it is a radio station, because they even have that awesome moment where they're trying to call out. They're like, "Is anyone there?" And it does a zoom out of the radio tower showing the whole empty city.
And they also realize that the DJ is like an automated series of like Rube Goldberg set up contraptions to like keep playing various recordings just over and over, and do sound effects and like all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's I really do like the design of the room. It's just so silly.
The set looks great, and some of the symmetrical framing of, there's one like amazing high angle shot like looking down at one of the girls when she goes into the bathroom at one point, but the use of mirrors, the use of the neon lighting, like it's a very good like stylish looking movie in some of these scenes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then a lot of it becomes, you know, it has all of the classic montage moments. You know, they have the moment where they're like out and about and shooting at cars and stuff like that, which is where they say the really funny line, "Daddy would have bought us Uzis." I love that line. I think it's so funny.
Which I was gonna say, by the way, improvised line, because
really? That's awesome.
Yeah, because Eberhardt apparently tried to get Uzis, and he was sent Mac 10s, and he was pissed off because Mac 10s are known for jamming, and so the actresses, they kept not getting the shot. They kept being like, "We're gonna shoot at the car. We're gonna, you know, so that we know how, you know, we're practice shooting for when we run into more zombies." And we're also meant to show that the girls are pretty, you know, their dad taught them how to shoot guns. They're going to be pretty formidable in some of the action scenes we see. It's like there's a purpose for the scene, and the guns kept jamming and fucking up the shot. And they were like, "This is a low budget movie. We only have so many takes that we can do."
Yeah.
And he literally said, "We have one more. If it jams, like, use it." We have to use the SOT, whatever it is. And so that was where they came up with the line of, Daddy would have gotten us Uzis.
That's so good. It adds so much. I just love that would be something that they're thinking about while in the apocalypse. It's like they still have a gun, a weapon, but they're like, this could have been better. It made me laugh so hard. It's such a teenage thing to say. It's great.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is one of the more fun stretches of the movie because it is like, how are the teen girls still being themselves and still having fun and kind of imposing their personality on the apocalypse? Because they're getting into the types of situations you've seen in an apocalyptic movie before. Like they meet a mysterious guy, and it's this guy Hector, played by Robert Beltran, who turns out to be this like truck driving stud who happened to survive the night by sleeping with the girl in the back of his steel truck on his way to San Diego. And he's, at first he's briefly afraid of the two sisters. He thinks they might be zombies, so he's pointing the gun at them. But then that's, not a very friendly way to meet people, so they get a little bit turned off by like the dangerous element of that meet cute. But then instantly, like maybe 10 seconds later, it's like he's kind of the last cute boy in the world. Yeah. So, we kind of have to treat it that way. And so, they start getting, I think it's Reggie's the one who starts to like flirt with him. Like it's almost like a schoolgirl in class, and you can hear, Samantha listening into it and being like upset, my older sister steals all the boys and now there's only one left and she's going to steal that one too. And she gets upset. So she starts like taking over the DJ booth and like naming herself in charge and declaring the legal drinking age is now 10 years old, but you still need ID. And like, I think there's one line where she's like taking requests from all you teenage mutant comet zombies out there.
Yeah. That's another perfect example of saying it's like 10 years old is now the drinking age. And I think she also says final exams are canceled. Like that's her perspective of what is important.
That's her dream.
This is
if she was president.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. This is kind of wild, and I do like that they do this and push it a little bit, is the way that they have kids in this movie, where the first time it happens is when there's a kid zombie and Hector actually tries to avoid shooting him in the head. And I kind of liked just that debacle that he was in. Because
it felt wrong to shoot a child. It felt immoral.
So he has to like hop out a window and run as fast as he can because he really doesn't want to shoot a kid in the head. And then when we get into the scientist element of this that are experimenting and all of that, they are eventually talking about extracting blood from kids, and in order to I can't remember exactly what their motive was. It was probably something like for the greater good or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's very funny because it is a little convoluted. I actually watched it the first time. I kind of had a little bit of trouble figuring out exactly what their deal was, and on a rewatch I paid a little bit more attention, and I actually did go, all the details are actually there. It does make sense. Okay. It turns out, because there's a really funny monologue that the one person who works down below, because it's run by Jeffrey Lewis, the regular Clint Eastwood collaborator, and he's being the more sort of like menacing, sort of sociopathic leader of the underground bunker of think tank scientists who were the ones who took the comet seriously, and actually they survived because they went underground and survived it. But there's his second in command is played by Mary Woronov, who was the cult movie actress who did a lot of work with like Andy Warhol and Roger Corman back in the day. She's also in Death Race 2000 in Shopping Mall, and she's great. And she's the part of the crew who saw this event coming, and is a little bit more morally perturbed about the fact that they're kidnapping children and experimenting on children to see basically how they survived, and which is when they hear over the radio that these girls are broadcasting themselves and survived, that's what they want to do. And she has a hilarious monologue later where she basically says, "We were so smart. We're the brightest people who knew to took the situation seriously." We actually see a brief hint of them in the opening prologue too, before it gets fun, before it gets silly, where it goes, "Some like heeded the warning" or whatever, and they're like shutting the doors. But she mentions that they left like an air duct open. And so they all got exposed. So that's all it is they are slowly turning into zombies, which is why they are zombies actually at the very end of the last scene when they all end up getting into the final action confrontation. But basically they're all infected, and they know they're slowly converting, and they're looking for a cure. So that's why they're kidnapping.
I get it.
Exactly. So they're kidnapping the people who they think survived legitimately, being like these in these people's blood there is a cure, and also by just like taking normal people's blood and replacing it with replacing it with their own or whatever, it's actually making them like last longer or something like that. So it actually
it's
is
like a vampire
it's all,
kind of thing too.
It is. There is a vampire quality. Jeffrey Lewis.
It's all coming together.
That's right. But yeah, those are the hints, the few hints of there being kind of like an overlooming danger to the situation that the girls are in, because they're not taking, like, they're trying to have fun with the apocalypse. They're not taking it that seriously. The movie is kind of adopting their perspective and their tone
and
very
this
broadly.
is almost happening in the background too a lot of the time. Like they're doing these cuts back and forth where all the scientist stuff is being set up as a possible threat, and then the girls are trying their best just to have a great time while this is developing.
Yeah. Although I do like that they throw in a couple details here and there. Like there is one section that is so bizarre, which is Samantha having that weird like nightmare within a nightmare sequence that is trying some of her subconscious anxiety is kind of bubbling within her, but it's still done in this kind of like gag way where the first one is her imagining herself drinking and driving while like ripping around, because it's what a child's dream would be. I get to I have my license, I can drink beer, I can do it all at the same time. I'm wearing a fancy dress and like all this kind of stuff. And then she gets pulled over by cops and she goes, man, cops in the apocalypse. I didn't even know these guys were still around. She's like, I'm so sorry, officer. She's like spraying her breath so they can't smell the booze. Yeah. And it turns out they're zombie cops who start like literally assaulting her. And she starts like biting the fucking skin off of one of their hands or something. And then she wakes up, goes into the bathroom, and then another zombie cop comes back and starts fucking like shanking her and killing her in the bathroom. And she wakes up again. And there's this whole quality of like, clearly the situation they're in, despite the fact that she's trying to push it to the side and trying to be like this bubblegum pop rock like perspective on it, there is a little bit of something lurking.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to have the dream within a dream thing. And I think they had Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street originally do the Sam role, and then it ended up going to Kelly Maroney. So that's just a little bit of irony, I guess, but that is kind of interesting. And also,
and 1 year before Nightmare on Elm Street too. So
yeah, exactly. And then it's also interesting just the way that he stylizes this dream, because this is the 80s. So you almost think that, in every 80s film, whether it be coming of age or anything, there's going to be nudity in it. And it almost sets it up in this second dream that she is going to have that moment with Sam.
Actually, I apologize. Same month as Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, shit. That's crazy. Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's wild, actually. But yeah, so you think that you're going to have that like, cliche 80s moment where, she gets naked for no reason and then something murderous happens or whatever. And she almost gets there. And then the zombie cop comes up again and stabs her or whatever. And she wakes up. And it felt a little bit like a play on that, just in the sense that it was immediately cut away and it didn't happen. And it's within a dream rather than just like, this is what's happening with the teenage girls. That I am grateful that there isn't that scene that is in the reality where they're just like fucking pillow fighting or some shit like that. I'm glad that he had some tact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I actually we'll talk about it with the next one, Soul Survivor. But because I was able to watch the commentary for that with some of the producers that he worked with, and they actually did say that he was quite knowledgeable about like what the genre trends of the mid 80s were.
Right.
And he was deliberately like using and subverting them like where possible. And like a lot of people wanted him to turn Soul Survivor into like a more like slasher-esque, like the girls running around kind of movie, and he like adamantly refused to do that.
Even, and we'll get to it, but even in the moment that it happens in Soul Survivor, it's just kind of like a one and done thing. It's definitely not overly excessive like what we've seen in this decade. We have fun with this decade, of course, but
it's a weird like personality gag that like makes the characters feel like they have some they have a history or they know each other. Like again, a lot of the decisions he makes, it feels like he actually does kind of write characters, which is that's something you can't always say about this era of 80s horror.
Yeah, by no means are we prudes on the show that say like no nudity or whatever. That's always bad, but it does feel like when you watch this decade especially, that it can be easily exploitative and just like just like, okay, we know why that this is in here. It always helps when there's like a comedy beat about it or a character beat about it, and it does feel like that happens in both films. So
yeah. But yeah, so part of the over-looming danger is the fact that these scientists are, literally looking to kidnap and harvest children who survived, not understanding that the reason they all survived is because they hid inside of like impromptu steel bunkers, that it's not because they like were exposed and are just immune, which is what I think they think. And that they're looking to gather from them. But there are also some like various other situations that they have to navigate through. We talked about the fact that first they think sort of like Hector might be a problem for them, who ends up kind of teaming up with them. They have to fight some zombies at a certain point. They start preparing to fight zombies. But maybe the best section of the movie is when they do, at a certain point, they're feeling a little sad about their situation. Hector, I think, runs off to like go check on his own family, which is actually a nice subplot. The fact that he doesn't just go, I'm going to hang out with the cute girls and protect the cute girls. He's like, I'm actually going to go see if my mom's okay. It actually kind of makes you like that character a little bit more. Oh, totally. So he's off doing that, and the two girls are left alone. I think it's in that wide shot you were talking about where they're hanging out, but with the skyline, the skyscrapers behind them.
Great.
And they're feeling a little isolated and lonely, and they're not really, obviously they're pretty desperate. They're not sure what to do next. And Reggie, to cheer Samantha up, just goes, well, do you know what? I bet you the malls are open.
Yeah.
And instantly girls
free.
just want to have fun comes in over the soundtrack. And we literally just get like a music video of them like a Dawn of the Dead style going around the empty mall, lavishly just like putting the dresses on, putting the makeup on, dancing around the Christmas tree, just having like it is such a fun little moment of just like pure energy on behalf of the girls who are like briefly trying to forget that they're in an apocalyptic situation. And shout out to just like Thom Eberhardt's sense of imagination, that he goes, it's not enough that they just like have fun in the mall. What would happen in the mall? Well, what if there were a bunch of stock boys who were at like the lowest social hierarchy of the mall? So there are a bunch of just like asshole like dorks who are resentful, and they see two girls going around town having fun, and they're like, not on our watch. They've like taken over the turf like Mad Max style, and they basically look like these pale infected vampires, like wielding guns and wearing sunglasses, and they've basically gotten drunk on their power over the mall because we own the store. I think at one point they literally go, it's the American way. We used to be like the lowest, and now we own it. And they end up getting into a whole extended submachine gun shootout with the girls. And some of the shots of like them walking around in like the shadows trying to hide from them, or like that one great image of one of the sisters' hands reaching for one of their Mac 10s, and it's like sitting in a pile of like high-heeled shoes in like one of the stores that they were in, and they start shooting security cameras, using mannequins to their advantage. At one point, Samantha literally starts grabbing shoes and just hurling at them at the guys, like laughing.
Well, that's what's fun
very
about
fun.
It, is that they have to set it up because they only have one gun as well, so they have to almost strategize that way, where Sam is distracting and then Reggie is shooting back, so that they can at the very least defend themselves. And I do like that, again, that just creates more chemistry. They have to work together. It's not just like two people with a gun trying to survive solely. There's still that kind of sisterhood aspect to it. And I also really enjoyed, before this all pops off, I just love when they first get to the mall. I just love going back to the 80s because the mall is so iconic and essential to like being a teenager.
The mall is so important. It's so crazy. There's one character who straight up goes, I think it's one of the scientist characters. It's a great line. Where would adolescents go with nothing to do?
That's
and they're sitting there. It's literally a pause beat where they go, oh. Oh, like they went to the mall.
Yeah. It's
the stores are open.
And then one of the first shots he establishes to still create this, like, remember that we're in the post-apocalypse, is they have all these shoes and dresses that they're going to wear and put on. And before they do, they just do this perfectly placed Uzi shot right beside it. Like, let's put down the Uzi or the Mac 10 or whatever and start shopping. And I just think that's
America. That's America in a shot.
Oh yeah, that's such an essential shot to begin this montage. And then you get introduced to the guys, and the one dude has one of the funniest lines where he's just like, his name,
he's the greatest.
We assume that he's Willie because he has this coat that actually says Willie on it.
It's literally a bathrobe with his name on it. Yeah, he's like, I'm Willie. I'm the leader.
Just like, I'm not crazy. I just don't give a fuck. So it just has this ridiculously over the top campy quality to it, especially when these guys come in, and anytime that they interact with like a side character, not to say that they're not having fun and they're campy, it's just that it expands every single time they're dealing with a zombie or the scientists or
they
boys.
Ground the girls in like the genuine, like, we're sisters, but we're taking the roles emotionally seriously, and our perspective is a little silly, but like we don't know that, right? Like that's kind of the point of it. Everyone around them who gets to ham it up and have them react to it. It's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I do like the setups too, where because they can't go overly violent with this, and I understand that because then that would kind of take away the fun.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty sure right after Temple of Doom, this is one of the first movies to take advantage of Temple of Doom establishing the PG-13 rating existing. Yeah, absolutely. And what they do in this is they'll have mannequins get their heads shot off during this shootout, and they before they start shooting at them too, they kind of use them as like where are the girls at? They keep cutting away when the stock boys are looking for them, and they'll like cut to a mannequin that they think is the girl for a moment. So there's some kind of fun direction that he does to set it up as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Willie takes Sam hostage, and he gets a couple of good lines. Actually, I do like, he's like, Bachelorette number 1 better come out, or I'm going to ice Bachelorette number 2. And he's like, really, he's so hammy. The way that's great. The way that he emphasizes it is great. And then Reggie comes out holding one of his men hostage, and that's when he's like, you don't understand. You can't take one of my men hostage. I can't have you doing that. He shoots his own man, which is why Reggie goes, you're crazy. Yeah. I'm not crazy. I just don't give a fuck. Yeah, he's doing the whole like eccentric psycho character. And it is really fun because it fits so well with the rest of the tone of the movie. So shout out to, I think it's Ivan E. Roth, legend. I don't know if he was in anything else, but absolute legend. He's on screen for like 3 minutes of this movie, just being like the leader of the Mad Max post-apocalypse stock boys of the mall. And he's a lot of fun. Sunglasses and like flamboyant shirts. I like that they dressed up as a gang as well, and they're unified. It's so funny and silly. I had a great time. Well, and when he captures them, he ties them up and like holds them in like the mall equivalent of like a serial killer dungeon where he's like trying to play Russian roulette with them. He goes like real psycho mode, which is when I think the scientists end up finally listening to the radio broadcast and finding them, because they go to the radio station, no one's there, and that's why they go, where would teen girls go in the apocalypse? I don't know. And then that's when they figure out they go to the mall. They end up rolling up with like the few sort of like military personnel that the scientists have, and this is one of the more interesting tonal switches it has to do, because just based on dramatic irony, like we know that the girls are in danger, but they don't have any idea that they're in any danger. They think that they've just been saved by like a government group, who just like saved them from like some psychos, and it creates this kind of vibe to it where, like they're separated, and Samantha is deemed like an unintelligent specimen, like not worth saving or studying. So Mary just has to go and like put her down and gives her like this injection, which we are led to believe like, essentially they put her down like you would like an animal or something like that. Well, Reggie is taken to the facility, which, by the way, again, speaking of some of the production design and set design, some of the money they did spend, I guess because they saved so much money shooting around LA, some of it's great. This facility looks like a Bond villain lair when they get into it. And you have Jeffrey Lewis just like running people on like blood bag experiments and, you know, looking for this cure. And they're, you know, and his test questions, which again are played for comedy, are like the trying to deem how healthy they are and whether they can use their, you know, blood to as a cure. Have you ever had hepatitis? No, but I've had mono once though. Teen girl response right there. She's like, did you just say that you have cancer? She's like, no, I am a cancer.
Still very relevant
just
today.
Jeffrey Lewis just getting so frustrated, being like, why am I dealing with just a teenage girl in this situation? Why can't I just harvest her blood and like get this over with? But yeah, there's something about the fact that just once again, there's implications that they should be taking their situation more seriously, and the teen girls just really don't have quite the same clue of what's going on.
Right. And then this is, I think pretty quickly you kind of get, it's interesting that the film does this, and I'm almost certain that I'm correct that it's in sequence, where they inject Sam, and so the film does kind of lead you to believe, at least for a little while, that she could be dead. But then almost immediately that the male scientist is, you know, he heavily implies that they're doing this to kids all the time, like the two kids that are also in the lab that we've already established. And then what's her name again? The woman scientist that
the actress's name is Mary. I think her character is Audrey.
Audrey White. And she ends up shooting the scientist like almost immediately after, when she feels like he might be coming on, like
that's around the time we're supposed to like start gathering that like she feels really uncomfortable with the fact that her job as a scientist is being asked to kidnap and like murder children now.
Right.
And she's just like not cool with that in the way that some of the other scientists are.
Yeah, and she is the one that ends up revealing, I believe, to Reggie what's going on. Or is it Hector, actually? I think it might be Hector.
It's to Hector, because she goes to the radio station to wait for Hector, and Hector comes back from his journey to find out his parents aren't okay and running away from that kid. And Hector comes back in a full fucking like Santa outfit with presents to surprise the girls. And the way that long shot in the radio station, that's like, again, really stylishly lit. So it's like dark and like neon colored. And he just comes in, he's like, ho, ho, ho. Like, what's going on? And Mary's in there with her sunglasses, like slowly turning into like one of these zombies, obviously, and admits to him what it is that the scientists are doing, why she's upset about it. And then she puts her sunglasses on and injects herself and essentially commits suicide before she turns into a zombie right in front of him.
And right before that too, I love the established shots before he gets to the radio station, where he's just Santa Claus driving in a convertible down the LA empty streets, and there's some pretty cool shots of that. There's one where he gets out of the
Christmas
car and then he just runs across the empty street as Santa Claus, and it's just, I don't know, it's so, the emptiness of the city mixed with that image of Santa doing that really made me laugh. There's just some bizarre things that only this specific setup of a movie would allow, and I did get a kick out of them.
Yeah, well, because and Hector is the one who ends up kind of having to roll up in the convertible to save the day, and there's a really silly scene where he rolls up to the think tank facility as an LA cowboy, and he's trying to like buddy himself up with the security guard, and he's literally like, "Hey man, like,
you want a beer?
Are you a cool cowboy like me? Do you want? I got a girl in my trunk over here. You like girls? Come on, come take a look at this girl in my trunk." And then opens up the trunk to reveal that Sam is in there, and Sam is okay, and that Audrey did not inject her with like the suicide serum. She injected her with sodium pentothal or whatever, so she would just appear dead to the other scientists.
Yeah,
they stuff that guard in the trunk, and they decide they're going to break in and they're going to help Reggie,
Worst
who at that
guard
point
ever,
is
by
like,
the way.
Horrible. Yeah, he blew the whole thing
Really
for all of them, because Sam is the one who breaks in and like shuts the power supply down, which kills all of their blood bag bodies, which makes them unable to survive and triggers the whole event. Like that guard just like held the fort down and they were fine. They would have caught Reggie. It would have been over with.
Yeah, it's like he just stood his ground. It's so funny that it took like just a cool guy dressed as a cowboy in a convertible just going like, hey,
I
man,
would
you wanna
trust a
hang out?
cool guy dressed as a cowboy in a convertible. If he rolled up to me and he was like, hey man, you want to be like a cool cowboy like me? I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, I do. You're way cooler than me. Yeah. It's so funny, man. I do feel like he had the dream of like just hopping in the passenger seat and going off on an adventure with Hector, and it just didn't pan out for him, unfortunately. He will be blamed for this entire
Hector's just too magnetic.
Yeah,
everyone likes him.
Absolutely. And then and it's wild too, because then you're going from this and then you're cutting back to the scientists who are experimenting on the children and saying things to the little girl like, you'll just giggle and then go to sleep. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay.
And not only that, and you'll wake up and you'll be in the North Pole with Santa.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way more fucked up line, because the girl is like, really? And the older brother is like, Santa's not real. Like that's when he starts figuring out that they're in a fucked up situation.
They're like, yo, I didn't want to tell you this, but mom already told me and something's up here. Yeah. It's so
and then
funny.
Reggie's reaction when she comes in and they were like, they told us we were going to go see Santa. She's like, you sick freaks or whatever. She's like, that's messed up.
Yeah, that's insane. You can't just kill these children. You got to lie to them
you have to promise them Santa before you drain the blood from their bodies. That's just
wild.
Messed up, man.
That is satanic. I don't know. Yeah, that's some crazy shit. It is, and it is, again, those whiplash moments. At this point, though, you're used to it. Like, I really started to latch on to that and just kind of embrace it. So
yeah, you have to realize that at a certain point, like, they're going to show you some stuff that's like a little bit kind of like creepy and a little bit like action and zombie and apocalypse movie and all of this, but they're going to, but then they're going to do it with like, the tongue firmly planted in the cheek. And, but that's just it, is it, they'll still exploit like cool imagery of like Reggie running around the like labyrinthian underground facility, and it's like smoky and it's shadowy. There's a great split diopter shot at one point of Jeffrey Lewis, who's like drenched in neon green, angrily looking in the direction of what we assume is like the blood bag bodies, almost Mad Max style, that have died because the life support went down. And in neon red behind him are all the other guys being like scared about like what he's gonna do next because he's so angry. It's almost like the red has become his rage, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill these people. I'm gonna chase them down. And so you'll get like a cool shot like that. And honestly, there's one really creepy image in this section that both times I'm a little bit like, ugh, which is totally deserved. It's a bit of revenge. It's revenge, though, on the people who were trying to get the kids to take the laughing gas.
I was going to mention this.
And it's when, but we experience it from the perspective of the other scientists who run into the room to be like, where are our other scientists and where are those little girls? And instead, it's like this really darkly neon lit room of the two scientists giggling with the laughing gas tubes, like basically like shoved down their throats, and they're like strapped to the beds like against their will. Yeah. And it almost looks like a shot just in like a horror film of people who have been forced to take laughing gas so much that they're like clearly they've gone insane and they're about to like die. Yeah. And it's so darkly lit and so kind of like, it's the kind of staging that like a slasher villain would have like displayed his victims or something. Totally. But like, it's just Reggie and the kids did that as revenge against the scientists who were like, trying to manipulate the children.
Yeah. And they even, when they put them on the table before they leave, they even say they're going to go see Santa now. Like they use the same threat, basically, or I guess not, whatever, they were trying to use it as this disgusting comfort thing, I guess, but they use it as a threat now. And I thought that was another thing where I was like, wow, they're really, I understand, you save the children, these people are evil, you have this kind of like this feeling that you want to get some vengeance or whatever, or their comeuppance or whatever, but just adding the insult to injury is so wild and to have for teenage girls to do, and then like run off and save the day. I was really getting a kick out of that.
There's a childish sense to like revenge happening there, but it's also like done in like this way that, you know, they're in a dangerous situation. So that's actually kind of fucked up.
Right, exactly. And but then again, it becomes fun because when they take the children and they save the kids, they like crash through with the convertible, and that's how they escape. So it's just it's always fun and cool and lighthearted no matter what's going on.
And they also bait them too, because they stop and they could keep driving away, but then they go, no, why don't you zombie scientists like chase us in your cars through the desert, by the way? Wouldn't that be cool? And Hector on the side put dynamite on every single one of their cars. So the second they turn their cars on, they literally just explode. And how many times it cuts back to the explosions, these big fireballs in the desert. It's great.
I even put in my notes after the explosion happened, especially the like last final big one, I was like, it needed to find a way to have an explosion at the end. It's just, that's true 80s action cinema right there. You can't not have it. So it really does check off all the boxes, this movie. Every single one of them.
Well, because they survive this like crazy zombie fiery desert apocalypse like action scenario in this like chapter of their life. They drive away, and I found the ending so charming that they are basically like, well, now we're the adults and we need to start like a new domestic life back in LA, and you know the rain has like washed all the dust away, and so the sky has started to clear, and we're gonna restart everything. Reggie and Hector essentially are the parents now of like these two young kids that they've adopted. And so you just get like these, 19 and 20-year-olds just like pretending to be like middle-aged like Brady Bunch parents, like taking photos of their cute new kids in formal wear while Hector's like throwing guns in the garbage can, and the kids are like, hey, you should give me those guns. And they do this whole thing where they try to cross the street, and they wait for the lights to change, and Samantha is the one who's like, well, that's fucking stupid. Like, there's nobody alive. There's no cars around anymore. She's like, the whole burden of civilization has fallen upon us. We need to go back to following the rules. And, we can't just rob malls all the time. We need to teach our kids about like, the good values of the past life and all this. And Samantha goes, that's so stupid. She runs across the street and nearly gets run over by a car. And it turns out that she doesn't have to go be a nun like she thought she would have to be, because she thought her sister stole the last boy. There's one last cute teen boy ripping around in a convertible who wants to take her driving.
Yeah. And
his name is Danny Mason Keener, or DMK, the license plate of the guy who was also good at the arcade game from the beginning of the movie.
So Reggie shoots him in the head. No, I'm kidding.
Can't have that. Can't have it.
That would have been a wild alternative ending right there. He's like, there can only be one high score champion. But I do love his response, and it is like this kind of teenage fantasy fulfilled, which I really enjoy too, which is he just pulls up after she almost gets hit, and he's like, you shouldn't cross the light like that. And she just goes, nice car. And he goes, thanks, I've got 23 of them. Want to ride? It's so funny, so silly, and just so immature in the best possible way, so juvenile. And I thought that was
it's
really
a teen girl fantasy movie in a way.
Yeah, and having the whole family at the end play football like in the empty LA streets as a family, just
as the camera is like craning up too. It's so good.
This newfound nuclear family vibe thing. It's so stupid and fun. I did think this was funny. Just the moment where Hector throws away the guns in the garbage. I was just thinking, like, nothing is really running. No one's going to empty that thing, so those guns are just going to remain. They're fully aware that those guns are just remaining in that garbage can, probably to use or to be discovered. But again, this is overthinking. I just think it's a funny observation.
Maybe some other kids will open up that garbage can and have a good time later.
Exactly. Have their own little montage. But yeah, fun movie.
Yeah, fun movie. For pivoting towards reductive rating round, this one ended up getting a kind of like a light to solid 4 for me. I had a really good time in the like watching this on a print, having the theater experience with it, hearing it kind of like work a crowd. It's a really funny movie. It got consistent laughs. It got deliberate laughs. It's not, I think it has the reputation of being like an incredibly campy in like maybe
like not on purposely.
Not intentionally.
I never got that vibe ever. Even the dumb parts, I was like, you're feeding into this, you're having fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eberhardt, like, he does seem to, like, have a knowledge of genre movies. He has a passion for genre movies. I don't think he looks down on them. I think he's having an absolute blast with them and finding a way to be like, what's an angle no one's taken, which is, what if there were teen girls who weren't taking them as seriously as they should be taken? And it's a funny joke. It's a consistently funny joke to be like, they're both army brats, they're valley girls, and they are the last people on Earth, in the same way that, like, in the I Am Legend story, that you would have Vincent Price or Charlton Heston in the original versions of those.
Right. And them being old men, that's like, we have to take this seriously. We've lived a whole life and have all this experience of what the world should be.
Yeah, the alienation and the loneliness really hits us. Meanwhile, they're like, let's go to the mall.
We're just trying to have fun again. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I found that just so weird and so funny. And I've really not seen someone do something in the exact register that he does it in. And I was really like kind of shocked at, I totally understand the critiques that people had in terms of how it's paced and in terms of the level of energy and intensity, in terms of how it actually builds its sense of danger and its sense of, being an action horror movie or being a post-apocalyptic science fiction movie. It is definitely not the strongest at doing any of those things, but it is weird and vivid, and it does it just enough that, you get, like the zombie sequences. They're not at a Romero level, but they're totally passable and totally strange and still kind of unique in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the fact that there's a zombie who just like beats a projectionist over the head with a wrench and then gets beaten the crap out of while the girl runs away on a motorcycle and then appears as a cop in a dream, murdering the teen girl. Like, it's just, there's enough weird factor in what it's doing on such a low budget and such an ambitious sense of like, how many different things am I going to do and how stylish can I really functionally make them? Like, I imagine he didn't have like a big makeup budget to do Romero level stuff, and he does way more of it than you would think him, I think, possible of doing, whether it's, ripping around the empty LA streets or whether it's building these kind of crazy, subterranean think tank facility areas where he does actually milk the creepy horror claustrophobia of it and all of that. And again, blending all of this into what is functionally like a mixture of an 80s consumerism satire, but also just like a fun poppy new wave teen girl hangout movie is great and consistent. And I think it would work less if the actresses weren't as good as they are, but I have to give a shout out to Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney. I think both of them are actually written characters. They're not just like teen girl. You could, and okay, on some level, they're teen girl archetypes. It's the older sister who's like a little bit more worldly, and the younger one who is like a really silly cheerleader, listening to the radio and all that kind of stuff. But I think both of them have actual personality. They have chemistry. They're very endearing. They're very adorable, and they're likable and infectious to spend time with. Like, I actually just like the scenes of them talking about their feelings and then being like, do you know what? It is a little sad to be a girl and there's no boys around. So let's go have some fun. And we're going to go have some fun at the mall. We're going to dance around. We're going to do the girly things. And then when the boys try to ruin our fun, we're going to absolutely get into a fucking gunfight with them and have fun doing that as well. And I don't know, there was just something so fun about that and so sincere that, I can't give higher praise than saying that it reminded me of if Albert Pune had been given nearly $1 million to make a movie. I think the vibe and the atmosphere and the way that it mashed 80s genres together in this very dorky and entertaining and silly comedy kind of fashion would have been similar to something that he would have done. And fun soundtrack, looks fantastic for how much it costs, and consistently weird and fun. So it ended up getting the 4 for me.
Yeah, nice. I think right now I'm going to give it a strong 3, but I could see myself watching this again because I did have a really good time, and I'm always looking for anything that's in the Christmas time to watch during the Christmas holidays. So I had a really good time. I think I was still getting used to all of the whiplash of some of the tonal changes, and some of the pacing does have that, like, we're really hanging out a lot rather than feeling like there's this suspense that's building. But again, that's on purpose. So I think I was kind of wrestling with expectations a little bit, knowing that it was a post-apocalyptic movie, and then this is kind of where it centered itself. But that being said, I do think that it's really ambitious for Eberhardt to do this many genres and try to have this much fun with something while also having a threatening protagonist and all of that. But even when you get to that point, it never undercuts the fun. That is what he wants to focus on. You 9 times out of 10, you almost think like the fun has to stop, and he just refuses to believe that. It feels like he's like, no, the fun can happen from beginning to end, no matter what threatening person.
The second they start feeling too lonely or too sad or too scared about their situation, he's like, no, we're having a mall montage.
Exactly. It's like, bring in an Uzi, bring in a convertible, bring in some shopping. It's like, we're going to have a good time no matter what. And I think that I do really like that premise and that thought. And I think I really appreciate and respect the commitment to that. And that is great. It does feel like it's capturing like what you thought was important in your youth. And I think that's why it works from this teenage girl perspective, and it doesn't feel super, there's caricature elements of that, and I understand that, but it's like, we're talking about teenage girls. Just like if we were talking about teenage boys, they'd be talking about similar things. This would be insulting if it was adult women, but it's not. So it feels like going into that juvenile perspective allows you to forgive it for having them talk about like dating when the world has just ended. It's like that feels still very important at that time. And
well, yeah, honest, I was gonna say that you would think that would be like a mean gag, but it's not. It's like it actually, like, the movie itself goes, yeah, that would suck and be lonely for this teen girl to like be alone. That's important to her, and the movie actually kind of takes her seriously, despite the fact like the characters don't know that they're in a silly movie,
right? And the thing is too, it's like it's the more mature version when you look at the older characters that have gone through this same scenario in different movies, but they're still talking about loneliness. It's just they're not talking about it the same way a teenage girl would talk about it, a teenager would have a little bit more lightheartedness and probably try to look for as much fun as they possibly could, because
and do you know who connected with this movie at the time? The reason it became a bit of a cult hit? Teen girls. And teens in general. Like the fact that he crafted this for a PG-13 audience is part of what worked for the movie. Like it ended up actually making money, and people were kind of like kids liked it.
Yeah, this thing being $700,000 for a budget is unreal, especially when you just see the cityscape shots and stuff. It does not. I've seen movies that are more expensive than this that look cheaper, so it's pretty impressive. Great lead performances. Totally agree. I'm also going to shout out Ivan E. Roth for that hilarious Willie performance in the mall. Loved it.
Don't give a fuck.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so funny. And I did read that this influenced Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a way, which is very cool. So shout out to that too.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So yeah, great, fun movie. I would suggest it, absolutely.
That actually explains so much. I really liked Buffy as a teenager.
Yeah,
so I'm like, there is some tonal similarities there, where it's like, we're taking the teen perspective kind of seriously, but also we're mixing it with like this genre context where maybe you should take the vampire stuff a little more seriously than like who you're dating. And
right. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, that's really cool.
So there you go. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for Night of the Comet. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be sticking around in 1984 and sticking around with Thom Eberhardt in his debut movie, which I think came out in theaters literally only 9 months earlier than this, Soul Survivor. Stick around.
You tell him what you know.
The laws of existence have been violated.
I've never seen anything like it.
The retribution of tormented souls is about to be unleashed. Soul Survivor. It will never rest. alone.
All right, we are back and we are talking Soul Survivor, the 1984 science fiction horror film written and directed by Thom Eberhardt and starring Anita Skinner as a commercial producer at a local television station named Nice, who was the lone survivor or sole survivor of a plane crash, a really horrific plane crash, and ends up with not just your usual survivor's guilt, but an even more intense and haunting feeling that she perhaps cheated death and is now being hunted down by some sort of invisible force to fulfill that destiny.
And if you're wondering about anything, the poster for the repackaged version does in fact say, before Final Destination, there was Soul
they're
Survivor.
aware. They're aware that the makers of Final Destination definitely had to have taken some inspiration.
That's a call out right there.
from this movie, whether that's just because of the log line of the movie, because it's very possible that the makers just like read that line and was like, that's good, we should do that. Because other than obviously having this concept that's very obvious where the inspiration came from, like Eberhardt's approach to this material could not probably be further from the like Rube Goldberg like slasher contraptions of the Final Destination franchise. I was actually shocked because I'd heard so long about this having this premise, because before I even looked up, I didn't know it was the same director as Night of the Comet, but I had already had it watch listed because I had heard people say good things about it. And I'll be honest, it also just has a sick fucking poster.
Oh yeah,
like like the like red-eyed skull hanging out in like one of those the
radars or whatever.
Yeah, one of the like plane radars, and I was like, damn, that's just cool. It looks like a sick like 80s exploitation horror movie. And then it had that premise, and I went, oh, it's probably gonna go crazy with like the Final Destination style set pieces. And there are maybe one or two moments where you can kind of feel the tension of like, what is the invisible force going to do to generate the death of a person or something like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the actual movie is way more eerie and kind of slow.
Yeah.
And it for me, it had way more of that purgatorial style of horror.
Totally.
Of movies we've talked about, like Carnival of Souls or like Messiah of Evil. I think Carnival of Souls specifically, just because that's the one that's also about like a woman who, like may or may not have died and maybe is already seeing things. And also it's a whole lot of people just weirdly looking at her and her like not understanding if like they're real or not. Or like if she's going crazy. So like so much of the actual eerie tension of the movie is similar to Carnival of Souls in that way, where it almost has this trance like anxiety about it more than it does like the full-on tangible horror sequencing. Which is not to say that it doesn't have that either though, but it's just that's the vibe of this movie, and definitely very different than Night of the Comet. From what I understand, partially deliberately, partially it was Eberhardt's decision that he wanted to really focus on tension and mood in a little bit more of a a serious and sinister way, rather than, it's not from a teen girl's perspective. So he doesn't have that, which is partially why it's different. But also, from what I understand, also it was the distributors of the film did also make sure that any of that hint of that personality was also cut from the film. So I don't know exactly what those scenes are, because the producers whose commentary I listened to seemed a little bit like they couldn't exactly remember what the scenes were, but they seemed to think that there was at least like 6 minutes worth of like character scenes that were meant to have some of that like humorous personality to make them, almost like the scenes we've seen here that are more like a rom-com type thing, to like feel like to, not let air out of the balloon, but to reset a little bit every so often before the malevolent force is like, I'm coming in and I'm gonna fuck shit up.
Yeah, and I do understand that, because one thing I did feel, I have mixed feelings about it, because when I was watching this, I did feel that consistency of a tone that you do that is purposely lacking in Night of the Comet. So I could kind of ride along with that dread and the haunted feeling that our character Denise is going through a little stronger. And I think that really works. But I'd be very curious to see what is the 6 minutes that's missing, because I do think that with that's what the main focus is, and you don't get nearly as much character moments that you have with Night of the Comet. Soul Survivor is really about this almost dreadful feeling that it's like you're constantly being followed. Honestly, for a more modern one, It Follows was huge. It had to be hugely inspired by this in a sense. Like it has all of the same shots where you're like, she's sitting in a room of some kind. Maybe she can look out a window and then someone's just standing there outside staring at her in a distance, like 100 yards away. Even sometimes walking towards her slowly. So instantly I was like, okay, this feels like It Follows, Final Destination. These films are definitely copying from things I didn't even know they were copying from. And there's also this really interesting almost lack of score. It does have the classic stuff of like there's some synth, but a lot of it is more piano, horns, strings, and then what they really focus on there is a humming distortion noise when the sort of zombie-esque characters pop up, but that's basically it. Yeah, and I think that is so essential to the whole hypnotic quality of it and how it feels like you're locked into her headspace and you're not even sure if people are seeing what she's seeing. Well, one of the first examples of that, and I couldn't believe how much like kind of dread and this creepy feeling I had when I watched it, because the shot itself is not scary, but you get this opening scene where Carla, who I think her name is Carla Davis, she's an actress and she will be working with Denise later on in the film, but she calls this producer and is just like, she's feeling like she has this haunting feeling that something is going to happen to someone that he's working with, and it will be Denise. And while that's happening, the shot of just a airplane coming towards the camera slowly starts to rise from the horizon. But instead of any environment sounds or atmosphere, it's just this low hum that keeps getting louder and louder. And it just feels like this. It gives you this feeling that there's something that you can't identify is getting closer to you and there's nothing you can do about it. And I couldn't believe that it was just a shot of an airplane, but I felt so much like haunted feeling about it. And the way through the editing patterns that it connects that kind of like doomed nightmarish, like she's having a premonition, a vision, and there's something creepy about it. One of the only other sounds you hear, I think, shortly after that is the sounds of like an intense like shaking, like an earthquake is happening or something, but it's literally happening in her house, not the plane. So it's actually connecting the two things together of being like, this plane is coming for you, and it's coming for you in like a way that it literally just flew over your house, but that doesn't make sense. Like that's a totally surreal detail that like clearly she's like, am I going crazy? Also, an important detail for Carla is she's like this aging, like washed up actress who's now doing these commercials, who used to be in these like old B movies. And she's a drunk. So nobody believes her, and everyone thinks that she's just some crazy lady who's, she doesn't actually have visions. She's just drinking herself to death, essentially, is what they all think. And by the way, played by an actress named Karen L. Larkey, who was a theater actress who's also the producer of this movie, and who was actually on the commentary track that I was listening to when I was trying to get some extra details on the film, because there wasn't a whole lot of background on this film, and I was just kind of curious where it came from. She was the one I was listening to talk about the movie. She's really good in it too, and she has we'll get to the details, but she has a couple scenes that are really just mean-spirited and sad, and we'll get to those. But what I loved about this movie, the introduction to it, and particularly how I was writing notes and how it ends up working the exact same way when it's revealed to you what is happening. It feels so much like a dream because it's just these kind of scattered things that keep happening on screen. My notes were basically like dark street at night, piano, man drives a bus, girl's on it. She's the only passenger. Seems nervous. Has a gun. Wakes up. Like it's such that's the description of a dream. You don't know what's happening, but there's these small, incredibly detailed moments that happen that seem significant, but you have no idea what they're connected to. And it's a great setup for what he's going to do with the movie. Well, and I was surprised too that the opening images, because I had watched Night of the Comet first, and I know Night of the Comet came out after, but the fact that the opening images of this were like empty LA streets, totally, mannequins,
Christmas decorations, and I was like, dude, he's doing the same. He's got some things that he likes in his movies, you know,
in the same year too.
Yeah.
So it's like this focus that he has was clearly something he was constantly thinking about, at least in this era.
Yeah, but the tonal difference in those opening images and how genuinely freaky they are, and the fact that, you know, Carla's having visions of seeing Denise, and she's seeing Denise riding this bus, and she's got some blood on her, she's holding a gun, she wakes up screaming, and oh my God, the images she sees of the plane crash when the camera is dollying along, that long dolly along the just the carnage. You're just getting like dismembered limbs that are like on fire. A dude like split in half with his like guts hanging out, all building to this image of Denise, played by Anita Skinner, who, from what I understand, this is her last movie. She was in a movie in the 70s called Girlfriends that people might have seen. She did this movie, and I guess maybe she just she didn't like acting, or she wanted to just pursue some other job. I do hope it wasn't Eberhardt, because I did hear that apparently Eberhardt was not a very easy guy to work with early on in his career.
Talented, but
actually, I don't know if he was good later in his career either. But the two producers who were talking about it were like, he's a very nice guy. Except for when he is under stress of making an independent movie, which is what he was doing a lot. And he was so as a result, that was their speculation actually for why he didn't have as, you know, they thought he was incredibly talented and that his first few movies were excellent and he could have had a long career, and they felt that maybe he wasn't the most personable guy. And so I hope that that's not what happened to Anita. She just had a bad experience, but she didn't make anything else after this, from what I understand. And I don't know, I thought she was quite good in this. She's charming, she's endearing, and also the fact that, you know, she's the danger of the images she's being put in definitely gives her something even more intensely to react to than the teen girls got to in Night of the Comet. Because I think about like the face that she makes in that shot where she's just holding tightly onto the armrest of her like plane chair, being the only person who like didn't get fucking split in half like on the beach. And that's the only image we see. The next image we see of her is her being like med evac'd on a helicopter, which I was also like, damn, where was this guy getting this budget from? And the producers confirmed that like they shot this, not in LA, in Santa Ana, California. And someone was so excited, the local government maybe was just so excited they were shooting there and not LA, that they just gave them all this shit. They were like, yeah, take our new helicopter. Like they were literally awesome. Like, hey, we just bought a new helicopter for our local hospital and we're like flying it to do stuff anyway. So why don't you guys just like take a ride on it, put your actress on it?
It's like the Simpsons episode where they come to Springfield and they're like, here's the nuclear power plant. You have full access.
Yep.
That's amazing. I love that. I do like too that he sets it up like, you don't know when she's thinking back on these things, there is still this dreamlike surreal quality to it. So you feel like you're getting a memory, but you're getting it specifically from her perspective. So it's not like total reality. The way that she sits in those seats are pristine. They're clean. It's like as if the plane did not explode and she flew through the sky and went through dirt and everything like that. It feels like she's just sitting there and she's been perfectly placed on the ground and everyone else has been ripped apart, but she's just totally clean. Nothing happened. And it creates this kind of surreal element to it that you're getting a subjective perspective. And also I like that within this scene, you also get the first hint that there might be this kind of zombie uprising, which is also interesting that they mix the haunting, almost ghost elements of death following you, but then create the physicality of it by making it like actual zombies taking over the earth eventually in some way.
He liked zombies, man.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because we only really see a few people change. So in a fun way, this is almost like the introduction to the zombie invasion. And it all stems from this girl, who should have died, and now death is just after her. So now everybody's getting infected.
And it's funny that it is like a literal thing, because this is like something like I don't know, as a writer, he's a very clean, like logical writer. Yeah. And so even the things that are like surreal about this movie, eventually you go, oh yeah, that literally is death, like possessing corpses. Yeah. In that brief moment, like while they're still functioning, like they haven't rotted enough that they're useless. Right. And so that's why he does it. He waits until they're like dead for like within 24 hours.
It's like
and
a
he's
disguise.
like, there's still enough blood in their system that he can use them to, like, tangibly, and also they're not quite like super pale and like dead, so he can walk around and people just go, oh, that's just like a guy who's still alive, even though there's something eerie and like off-putting about them.
And that becomes actually incredibly important to the logistics of everything, because there's murder scenes in this where these zombies are actually murdering people, and then when they investigate, they're like, well, we don't know how this could possibly happen. It's just that there's no real evidence here. And if there was evidence of someone physically being there, it seems like that body has been dead for 2 days. So how does that make any sense? It's just so interesting that Death uses the zombies as a disguise.
Death is gaslighting her.
Yeah, to be a slasher villain. It's so interesting. And eventually they even get to this point where the autopsy guy is saying like, well, all of these bodies have drained the blood actually into their legs because they've been standing up this whole time murdering people. And that doesn't make any sense because they all died in different ways. And I just love that they included all these details. It makes it so much more it's more fun, and it also mixes that, like I said, the surreal elements with the reality, and it's really cool.
No, I actually think Eberhardt's just he's kind of a good writer.
Yeah.
Like, he's a decent writer of these genre movies, and he clearly like cares and has watched enough of them to like remix them in ways that, you know, feel slightly unique, but follows enough of his own rules regarding them and has a sense of style about them. And from what I understand too, I didn't check this on Night of the Comet or not, but no, he had an editor on Night of the Comet, but he is also the editor on Soul Survivor. So it was like his project.
Yeah,
he was like, I'm the one.
Really, I guess, except for those 6 minutes. There must have been some final cut thing, I guess, a little bit, but
that was just it. He handed his cut in, and then the distributors were able to trim his cut. But everything is still what he assembled. It wasn't like they took the original negative and were like, we're gonna do our own scenes and we're gonna restructure this and all of this. So like everything you see, despite the fact that it is slightly compromised, it is still, you know, sequenced in the way that he intended to have it sequenced. And also, I wanted to give a quick shout out to this too, because we haven't mentioned it yet. The debut of cinematographer Russell Carpenter, which I was legitimately shocked when I looked at that name and I clicked that, and I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I mean, this guy. Yeah, like he went on,
Target,
you know,
what the fuck? Oh my god, I just forgot to look this guy up. That's amazing.
This is literally the first film he ever shot.
That's crazy. It looks great.
And
it really does.
It does look great. Like, you know, and yeah, obviously he went on to shoot fucking Hard Target and True Lies. And he's right now shooting Avatar 3. Or no, sorry, he shot Avatar 2 and 3 back to back. So he shot both of them, but he shot all those for James Cameron. So he's still working today.
5. Yeah. Fucking crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just cool that, like, you know, like Eberhardt clearly has, you know, enough talents of his own, and then the first person he hires is someone who goes on to be like a pretty important cinematographer for the career of James Cameron, who, you know, doesn't shoot horrible looking movies in my opinion. So, you know, it's kind of cool that he got started here, just developing the eerie, dreamy, kind of morbid, psychic nightmare mood of what they're doing here, and which they get into fairly quickly, because again, that nightmare sequence sets up everything you need to know about the danger that, you know, Denise is in, the experience that she had, without just straight up showing you the full sequence of the plane crashing, because obviously they didn't have a budget for that. They could just show you the aftermath. Mm-hmm. And then slowly introducing you to the kind of cute little rom-com element, which is established through the meet cute with her doctor, Brian, played by Kurt Johnson from The Fan, who, you know, tries to kind of help her through, one, the sort of celebrity attention she's getting of being, you know, the lone survivor of this horrific accident, and also the sort of any survivor's guilt, depression she might be experiencing, though she clarifies she doesn't feel unworthy of survival in the way that maybe people who suffer from survivor's guilt experience. She feels more like, as she describes it, when a computer glitch resulted in her being delayed being charged on like a dress for weeks or something. And she was just like, you know, she was at first assuming that she got lucky, but kind of knowing in the back of her mind that it'll get fixed eventually and I'll get dinged. And she's like, that's kind of the more what it is that I'm feeling, which is then translated into the experience and the sort of sensorial image making of the movie, which is like, yeah, it's not about a company not charging her card. It's about death being like, I'm coming for you, through a series of like surreal and at first it is like the Final Destination style, like attempted supernatural murder set pieces. Like, you know, she's seeing like the creepy little girl, which it does turn out is being possessed by death, and she finds out is like literal corpses being taken from the morgue and walking around, but also things like the driverless truck like nearly running her over. You know, and is like happens. One of the more like literal Final Destination moments where she opens up. She's like, there's no truck in here. What the fuck just tried to kill me?
Yeah. And I like that this happens right away. There's not even a lot of lead up. This is like, she sees the ghost girl before she even leaves the hospital. She's in like the parking garage or something like that. So, and it's this constant development that it's as soon as she survived, there's been something that's going to catch up to her. And I think that's how she puts it in the dialogue too, is like, I feel like I'm about to get caught. Like there's just something that's looking for me, and I've done something wrong. There's something
in the air. Yeah. I'm waiting for the axe to fall. She has a couple different like ways of describing the feeling that the movie captures the mood of quite well.
Yeah. And I like the idea that she feels like she's going to be caught, which means she does feel like she's gotten away with something. Like she just has this feeling that she should be dead, and she's cheated it. And so it's cool to have that lingering feeling. And then the movie really never lets up. It's like you have slight moments of you know, hangout time.
The makeout session in the park with her doctor friend.
Yeah, exactly. But those are honestly very short lived. And the stuff he focuses on is just like her being followed, her being watched, her feeling like she's being watched, even if she's not.
Well, yeah, literally she stops making out with him and he goes to one section of the park and she goes to the other section of the park. And right away, there's already like some like creepy old dude staring at her from across the park.
Right, exactly.
Which is very It Follows kind of moment. Or definitely. That dude who's like waiting in the middle of the highway, or that denim jacket guy in the parking garage in that like escalator elevator moment that almost like recalls like Michael Myers in the bushes or something like that. It's fairly effective.
Yeah, and what I like too is this how he'll use the camera. Like I love the shot where, you know, she yells at the guy where that she almost runs over in the middle of the highway, and then he just stares and does nothing to the point where she feels entirely freaked out by it. And in order to just give this longer feeling of being watched, the camera just stays stationary on the back of her car as it drives away, and you just see him never move and just stare and stare and stare. It's just it just has this dreadful feeling about it. And even before that, a simpler version would be she's in her room, just in her bed for the first time since the accident, and he's just setting up these shots of the house and nothing's happening. It's just like,
I was gonna say that too.
Here's a flower pot, but it's quiet, and it just feels like something is coming. Something's already there. So it just
mind like something malevolent out of just like the mundane hum of her house is like that's just good.
That's good
filmmaking
stuff.
And good editing and good mood setting. Like the leaky taps, the ticking clock, the cracking fireplace, and the way that it builds to that piercing like phone ring right next to her head too, which is also where she ends up getting killed. And I was like, oh, it's so fucking a great shot.
The connections between her leaking faucet and then she starts thinking back on that girl ghost that she saw earlier, and she was dripping wet. And so
because she drowned in like a boating accident or something, and she had been literally taken from the morgue while she was still wet by death. Like, all these details build in this really cool way.
And what's cool too, I say ghost because that's kind of what it implies at the beginning, but then once you see the whole movie and get the whole perspective, it is really just like a physical girl standing there dripping wet, like kind of threatening her and just looking at her, because these things are zombies by the end of it, like you come to find out. But I love that half of it is a ghost movie, and then the reveal is that no, you're actually looking at zombies. So now we're in a whole different horror genre. So it's just, he gets to play with both again in a way too, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, the slow burn way it accumulates details like that when she eventually does hear from, is it the doctor character who says that, there was a girl who was brought into the morgue that was like in a boating accident or something. And the way that he does that slow zoom on her face while she's realizing that I didn't imagine something. I saw the corpse of a real girl.
Yeah.
And like, that's freaky, you know?
Yeah. And then there's this, like, then you start to get the premonition aspect with Carla, because she starts calling her and she doesn't want to almost outright say it, because maybe she thinks she'll think that she's a freak or something, but she's just like, I just wanted to tell you. She's been treated
like a drunk, crazy woman who's like past her prime and should literally just like fucking go kill herself for, you know, the last however many years or whatever, right? So she goes, well, here's another person who won't fucking believe me, even though Carla does. There's that great moment where I think it's right before the elevator sequence, right, where she goes up the stairs and she goes up there and she's just like, you get those great like high angle vantage points of like the staircase and the office windows, and she, you know, has a conversation with her where she's like, look, you're blowing every take of your commercial because you're stressed out staring at me through your whole take, and like, you're gonna lose this job if you keep doing that. And she's going, okay, well, just so you know, I am a drunk, but I'm not fucking crazy, and I keep seeing you and horrible things happening in my mind. And
and this setup too.
I saw you survive that plane crash, and she's just like, you know, and it's funny, she thinks that she's fucking crazy and she doesn't believe her right away, and then she totally suffers the consequences for that, because she goes, oh, the same way I'm not believing her, now when I try to tell people things, everyone's gonna think I'm crazy and hysterical and like not being, you know, real. And, you know, she ends up going through the exact same experience. Like, Death is kind of gaslighting both of them a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking on his writing, and we can get to the end and all that, but the full circle element of their relationship is fantastic too. The fact that she's warning her, and then eventually it will become a certain thing that happens between them. But I like that she's kind of the first to really warn her at the same time. So for it to turn into this dark irony near the end, it is really good writing. Like, the first,
it has a cyclical like ghost story quality to it that I really enjoyed and found creepy. Yeah,
and in both ways, we'll talk about it with her character, and then even the shots when you start to realize that the introduction scene is kind of this full circle element of her realizing how deep she is into this, like how death is going to get her no matter what she does.
And also for both of them, that death is the only escape.
True.
The relief.
Yeah.
Like, how horrible is fucking living this way where you're seeing these things and literally the only way out of it is to, you know, in some capacity die, whether it's to let it fucking take you. Like, there's a sense of relief almost at a certain point where you're like, man, isn't this a horrible, dread inducing like life experience? And also the fact that I try to describe it to anyone or explain it to anyone, and they literally go, that's just a crazy drunk woman that we shouldn't pay attention to, when both of them do it. Because even when she starts explaining it to the doctor, who, to his credit, he does end up believing her and trying to help her, and helps her more than any other character in the movie. But like, one of the first things he hears from the cops is that she's mixing prescriptions and like getting wine drunk and all this stuff, and goes, are you like fucking, you know, a lot of people who survive these kinds of incidents become suicidal. Like, is that what this is? And she's literally like losing her mind at the idea that like no one could believe her, even though the danger is like so prevalent and so close to her. And I think one of the more subtle creepy moments in the movie is when they have that diner scene where she's describing, you know, I'm waiting for the axe to fall. There's something in the air. I feel like I'm going to be caught. She's describing all these things to him, and he's listening, but he's not quite feeling the level of intensity she feels about it. And there's just this great moment where it cuts to someone staring at her across the street in the diner. Yep. And it was one of those moments where you feel like in a more traditional, like if this was a slasher version of the movie, she would scream and freak out, and the guy would be like, there's no one there. What are you crazy? Crazy lady, I don't understand.
Yeah,
and there's something so sad in Anita's performance that she goes, I'm not even going to tell him that someone's there.
Yes, totally.
He's not not going to believe me. It's sad.
She feels like she's completely alone. I noticed that thing too, because as soon as they did the cutaway to that, I almost felt like they were going to do a big pop-up, go back to her, and she'd jump and be like, don't you see that man over there? He keeps staring at me. And the fact that she just keeps it within herself, knowing she's kind of in the same dealing with the same situation that Carla is, where it's like, you wouldn't believe me anyway. So what is the point of this? Like, I'm just going to have to deal with this and hope that at one point you can see what I see. I think that is a great decision in that scene. And I also just wanted to talk about how mean-spirited the producers are to Carla in those moments. It's wild.
They're ruthless.
They don't even have to do it, but I think they want to just hone in how like cutthroat this specific industry is, and it also connects to Denise having to be a very seemingly nice person, but in this kind of environment all of the time, and she has to balance both by being like kind to Carla as a person and a performer, but then keep her job with all of these asshole producers who are just saying shit like, "Oh my God, she looks 56 when she's 40" and stuff like that, like just really ruthless shit. And there's a ton of them. I couldn't write them all down, but it goes on for a bit. It really focuses in on how terrible these people are. But it helps. It helps build that kind of dread, not even just that death is approaching, but the people around you aren't helping much either.
No, and that sense of like isolation for Carla and for Denise is like such a key. Like, it's not just a mood. It's not like it's a key to how death is getting them alone so that it can actually do what it wants to do. And part of its manipulation tactic, right? Which is which ends up, being how he, spoiler alert, gets them both by the end of the movie. He uses it functionally at a certain point. He's like, why don't I just kill two birds with one stone? Totally. Or maybe he gets a little lucky. Maybe he gets a little lucky that everyone mistreating Carla so much is partially why she makes the decision she makes that allows him to do what he does.
Yeah. And I do like too that they set up a couple things with the doctor where he at least knows that things are peculiar. Like, there's one line where he says, yeah, someone took a body out for 30 minutes and then put it back. That seems strange. And
weird. It's
kind of the first time he openly talks about something that feels weird and a little bit in line with what Denise has been going through in some capacity. And I like that when she does apologize for her acting weird, because of course she would be in this circumstance, he is honestly very understanding and still is trying to be empathetic and understand what the hell is going on. It's clearly a very weird situation, so he's trying his best. But I like that he's not built into that cliche of just like, total asshole, disregards it all. And
no, he does go investigating for her, despite the fact that he clearly has doubts about the entire thing, and does partially think that she's like a suicidal woman who's like maybe overdosing on prescription drugs and hallucinating.
And even in those moments, you feel bad for her too, because it's like she has this moment where she does take the medication and is kind of drinking, and she's just like, it's a coincidence. It's a coincidence. And so there's that halfway point of her trying to convince herself that what she has been seeing is not there. It's just, she's being gaslit or something like that. And it's really sad to watch, the kind of just her decaying a little bit.
Well, yeah, and how few people she feels like she can turn to. Like, the cops didn't listen to her. She kind of thinks that her new doctor boyfriend didn't listen to her a lot, even though we do know that he is going and investigating for her. So, he is taking it more seriously than most people. But like, one of the things she gets really punished for is the sequence where she's, like at home alone, and she decides that she's going to go to the neighbor girl across the street who will listen to her problems and doesn't judge her like other adults would because she's a girl, which is funny because I don't know, there's something about Eberhardt and like the teen girl perspective of like, they're on the wavelength where, this girl Christy would actually, she'd listen to her problems and maybe believe her that something weird and supernatural is happening. And that's kind of cute that they have that relationship and that kind of trust with each other. It does lead to that very funny moment where she knocks on her door across the street and interrupts her playing just the usual round of holiday strip poker with your friends that we all play, of course.
Absolutely. Gotta get to know each other on the holidays.
Where you also get cult movie actors Brink Stevens of Slumber Party Massacre and Sorority Babes and the Slime Ball Bolorama fame doing exactly what she does in movies during the game of strip poker.
Absolutely. Yep. Good to see her again.
there she is. And it is a funny, like, goofy little moment though. Where like the kids have like lines of dialogue about like, they're getting away with something in the basement and there's no adults around. And
I really like too that it turns in, it's not this like like it's 3 girls and then just 1 guy, but all the girls are like, let's see that dick. It's so funny to me.
Yeah, they're so stoked.
In
They
fact,
can't
they're
wait.
even, like, the reason that the boobs come out, they're like, she's hesitant at first, and then the one girl's like, look, I know you don't want to, but we want to see that dick. That's essentially what she's saying. And she's like, if you don't show your boobs, then he's not going to have to show his penis. So you got to show your boobs. And then
it's just the rules of strip poker.
Yeah, it's so silly and funny. And
they're being responsible about the entire affair.
This scene kind of felt like probably what the rest of those 5 minutes was cut, in a sense, because this does feel like it has some more humor involved. And you even have the shot of the one guy doing this giant, like, stupid smirk smile when someone makes a joke about him having to take his pants off and stuff. So it feels like Tom's having a little bit more fun, like he was in Night of the Comet in this sequence, and that is probably what we're missing a little bit. Well,
and you also feel like he likes to create likable personalities and characters just so that when you it's not like the annoying version of this scene where it's like you're like, oh god, I can't wait for the slasher villain to kill all of these teens playing strip poker because they're just so cruel or so annoying.
Yeah, they're fun. Like, you don't want them to die.
Yeah. No, in fact, it just makes Christy feel like a more sort of like lived-in character for that she has an adult friend who's like, I'm gonna kick all my friends out because I'm gonna listen to this lady's problems,
right?
You know, kind of moment. And then she falls asleep on her couch and goes across the street and gets pretty horrifically murdered by one of the zombie corpses, which was, speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, another thing I thought about, because I was thinking of Heather Langenkamp watching Johnny Depp die across the street, right? And she can't do anything about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So just with the staging of it, because that is a weird decision that they have Anita go across the street so that she can fall asleep on her neighbor's couch so that her neighbor can go to her house and get killed in her house because the zombie thinks that it's killing Denise, but it's not. It's another woman. There's just something weirdly, slightly convoluted in the staging of that sequence, despite the fact that, like, logically it mostly makes sense.
Yeah, it is funny too to think that Death would be confused about the person and the address or whatever.
They're like, God damn it, wrong
like,
fucking girl.
Wrong?
Fuck.
Shit. Oh, they're gonna fucking fire me. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, there's something about that made me laugh. Like, he'd be confused. He wouldn't just, it'd be like such a massive mythological
like, a
entity.
girl walked into the house. It was the right house.
I thought it's the right house. Death having a mix-up is
I can't
so
be blamed for this.
Yeah, that is actually hilarious. And I do really like the jump scare pop-up. I thought was really good when she's like, you know, it takes its time to kind of go throughout the house, and then she opens the sliding door and looks outside, nothing's there, and then she closes it and the zombie's right there in the reflection and then attacks her. And it's just, it actually kind of worked for me. I was like, that's a decent pop-up right there. And I like that it's in camera and everything. It was cool. Before this, I think, is when she does the parking garage scene, which has some unreal controlled camera work. Like, I don't know if it's what are they called again? The setup that they use for that, Steadicam.
The dolly?
I don't know when that was like developed or whatever, but yeah, it feels, I don't know, maybe it was a dolly, but it just feels like there is slightly more movement, but it could have been a dolly.
I don't know if these guys would have been able to afford it, but it was
true.
Around and available by 84.
That's a good point. We do have to keep in mind the budget for sure. Anyway, it looks great.
But also keep in mind, like, he was definitely, I mean, people made John Carpenter comparisons for this guy in other instances that I saw. Definitely, like, John Carpenter found a way to do those kinds of shots in Halloween without having access to a literal Steadicam, right? So he could have been replicating. Yeah, he could have been replicating. Like, he had seen Halloween, and he definitely is stealing some of even the stuff we've been comparing to It Follows. It Follows was stealing stuff from Halloween. So Halloween is definitely a little bit in, like, the creepy, moody buildup of some of this stalker imagery. Even though some of the more surreal elements are maybe closer to something like The Fog or something like that.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that the parking garage is, like, pretty much completely empty. There's no one there. And again, it's just kind of using that space to create, like, death could come at any angle and there's nothing you can do about it. And what's also strange is that you still get that dread built into you, but because of the open space of a parking garage, there aren't many places to really hide either. So your brain is kind of doing both, where you're like, well, if I can't see anybody, there's no one here. But every once in a while, you see that pole. It's like someone behind that. You start to hear that hum that rises, and it just creates this thing like something has to be watching me, even though I should be able to see it. And then
and also the stillness of the imagery and the stillness of the zombies, like the way that she turns around that corner and like looks up the stairs, and there's one just standing there at the top of the stairs, just being like inhumanly looking at her, and then slowly walking towards her like Romero style as she's getting into that elevator, and it like reaches in, and it, the doors close on him before he can do that, which I will say I appreciated the gag that she runs away from the zombie. She's in a really creepy, moody sort of set piece with the zombie. The elevator doors close, she goes up, and who tries to get in on the next level? Mr. Santa Claus himself. Oh, yeah. I was waiting for Santa Claus to be like a zombie at some point or something. That's the closest image you get to it.
Yeah. Didn't he have like cut off sleeves too? I thought he was like buff Santa or something like that. But I do really like it's something that's in all kind of zombie movies at this point. But just because we know it's death, it kind of gives a different perspective of the slow walk, which is rather than just like they are dead, but the death quality of it makes me feel like it's so like, I'm gonna get to you eventually. I don't have to.
He's also just patient. He's like, I'm gonna get there, man.
Oh, you got in the elevator? Coming. All right, I'll see you in a day. It'll happen. It's inevitable. So I think that kind of goes with it too, and I like that.
He's like, touche on this day, ma'am.
Exactly. You win today, but I'll see you tomorrow.
There will be a new corpse added to the morgue tomorrow, and you damn straight I'll be walking around in it.
It's like, the more bodies, the more opportunities, the more disguises. I love that.
Well, and I do love that at a certain point the surreal quality of it. Like it is tense, and it is creepy. I do like the moment where the neighbor girl gets drowned in the pool across the street, and she goes looking for her. Yeah. She goes into her own house, and it turns into this sort of like long, this kind of like point of view perspective, wide angle imagery of her walking around, but then also some zooms and some tracking shots of her going around, grabbing the knife, doing the kind of stuff that you expect. And it builds to that great moment where she gets chased through the house, and she opens the door, and she's got like the psycho knife drawn, and there's like cops pointing guns at her. Like, what the fuck?
That part is so funny. And that like she opens the door for the place that the cops are called to for help, and instantly the cop just points a gun at her face and is like, "Put the knife down, lady." He's so nervous. Like, dude, you should not be
I love that he leaves room for humor like that, and I am curious what those other ones were, because that moment is great. The follow up to her being like, she's just like, spooky shit is happening. Like, I can't explain it. Like, just spooky shit.
Yeah, like this, it's getting weird. I don't know what to say.
It's great, and the movie moves too. This is like 85 minutes. There isn't an economy to it, because I do like the fact that we've kind of described what is the kind of the meat of the movie. The last bit of the movie left to describe is like the cops finding her story sort of like ridiculous due to once again the fact that she's describing like corpses getting up and chasing her and killing her neighbor, and her neighbor's body couldn't be found because her neighbor is actually being a reanimated corpse as well and being used. But Brian, obviously the doctor, trusts her enough to look into it and goes to the coroner and starts finding out some of the details that you were talking about earlier, like the blood in their legs, meaning that clearly these bodies have been standing and walking around after the time of death, which is pretty fucked up. Also, the detail that one body is like covered in like mud and rain, and he's just like, didn't you just tell me that guy died 2 days ago in a car? So how is he covered in mud and rain that just happened like 6 hours ago last night?
Yeah,
like, what?
I love that was when I started to really, well, not started, but there were more accumulating details that I really learned to fall in love with, which was that they were talking about all these little logistical things that would happen using physical dead bodies to kill people. It's like
I appreciate that the characters in his movies aren't like idiots.
They're
thinking through every detail that's being presented by the film and actually like wrestling with them.
Right, which causes more tension. You just think like, okay, well, if they are going to find out what happens, that means that there is going to be more defense against death, which just creates more friction, and that is interesting. And like you said, it makes them not stupid, which is always great. Always.
Yeah,
a good thing.
And it leads to a sort of great final set piece where, like Denise is taken home by a very hilariously written character I'm going to describe as just
perverted.
creepy pervert taxi driver.
Yeah, for real. He's listening to like sex radio.
and like not only being an asshole and like listening to sex radio and like sex advice on the radio in front of his customer, but also then trying to be like talkative and like get her involved, being like, what do you do to excite your man, lady?
Yeah, like and he's saying it. I do like,
by the way, if you don't have any cash on you, we can work something out, by the way.
Yeah, which by the way, he says that as she's holding cash. It's like he's just such a piece of shit. It's absolutely wild.
He's a crazy pervert. Well, and she is so like, she actually handles herself very well. She's basically like completely just ignores him and shuts him down and doesn't get too like crazy about it or anything like that, even though she's totally allowed to, because that guy's being insane.
Yeah, and I think I remember what I was going to say. And yeah, what was funny too is that when he asks her about the what do you do to turn your man on, he does it actually with kind of like a sincerity, like he's genuinely interested, but he's such a fucking creepy pervert. There was something, I think that character is obviously disgusting, but for some reason he performs it in this way that isn't like this overly like, hey, how are you kind of thing. He's almost doing it with a smile on his face, which probably makes it even creepier. Yeah, if anything, it makes it like even creepier because he's so comfortable with doing it, and it's not like a caricature version.
Yeah, well, and once again, I think it's just used because he's like every side character, no matter how minuscule, needs to have like some semblance of like personality.
Yes,
and something for the actor to work with. I think he also had a background in like theater and stuff too, which is why a lot of the actors who appeared in this were people who were in like friends and colleagues and in the theater community and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And he instantly gets
that actor, but like even the coroner like has some personality to him. Definitely. And that guy does, and it's helpful because you only have one scene to learn what that guy's personality is, and then see him go zombified mode with when he tries to pick up a girl. Christy, and it's a useful tool because he's like, oh well, now he is trying to pick up on a teen girl like that, right. Something totally believable that character would do.
We've set up,
and then. Yeah. And then you get like the shock image of, oh, the teen girl is Christy, who is now a zombie murderer who is, holding a knife from her kitchen.
That's a great
just
shot.
Looking into her house.
I really love that shot of him like coming up, and then the camera kind of pans out and you see her holding the knife behind her as he's approaching. And again, because of the budget, they don't even do the death, but I like all the really creepy implication of it all. And normally you see the aftermath, which can have, a little bit of spice to it, but it's...
and also the missing knife in her house, because she knows that the zombie was just like, had just walked there, rampaged through her house looking for her and didn't find her and then went back.
It's doing more of that cutaway stuff that it's been doing to set up like her perspective versus the action that's going on. And it's been doing that throughout, whether it be like her subjective experience.
It's such a hilariously extreme form of logic, but the movie logic of the movie is that the creepy pervert drives her to her house, drops her off, then would be the one character who would pull over for the girl to give that girl the information, I just dropped a woman off at that house. So then the zombie knows to go back to the house with the knife she just stole from the house. Like, it's so funny you feel like he probably just didn't need to put him in the situation that he put himself in. He could have just written the zombie girl is just at the house when she gets there, but he writes himself into these funny situations and then actually finds a way out of them. And I don't know, it's unique. And it's kind of it's interesting. It's definitely sequencing you've not quite seen in the same way, because it just does also result in Christy, the zombie, going back to the house, being there in time to think that she's about to stab Denise, and instead finding Brian, the doctor, pulling up and getting maybe the one gore shot of the movie where she Halloween style fucking plunges that butcher knife into his gut and just instantly murders him. And then she's like, well, there was, if I wasn't lonely before, the one guy who even slightly believed me and was looking into this is just instantly dead, and that's it.
Yeah,
so, fuck.
And he was on the verge too, because the scene right before that, he stumbles across the cab driver incident and gets a gun and everything and feels threatened, and so it's that moment where he is like, okay, finally someone's on my side, stabbed. So she's a very lonely character in this sense.
Well, yeah, and she finally gets to assume the sort of the Carla's premonitions, the imageries from from the opening of the movie, where she's crying, she's alone, she's hysterical. The blood that she was covered in is actually Brian's blood. She's ripping through the sort of empty streets in her car, and the reason she has to take a bus is because she ran out of gas, and the reason she had to peel away as quickly as she did and like waste her gas was because the fucking creepy taxi driver zombie was like chasing after her and or trying to grab her in the vehicle and stuff like that. And yeah, there's just a lot of really creepy we're returning back to this moody imagery, although the one image that's not in the opening that they used during this stretch of it that I thought was really effective is that one shot of what it seems to be a mannequin. There's a mannequin hanging out on the California sidewalk, and you're like, what's that mannequin doing there? And then it just starts walking away, and I was like, fuck you.
For sure. I also like the two kind of, I guess I was talking about it at the very beginning, but it's the two full circle moments where it at the beginning I was explaining how all my notes felt like it was just a dream, like just these little moments were happening where she gets on the bus, she discovers a gun, all of this, but we have no context. This is where you actually get that, and she gets back on the bus, and it's kind of come full circle. But then the other thing is that eventually she gets to Carla, and she's kind of talking to her and trying to just explain what's going on, and Carla just has a gun and shoots her dead. And you're just like, it's kind of a shocking moment for it to happen that blunt and coldly to this character that we've been watching fight for so long. And it's just the irony, the really dark irony of her warning her this entire time and never having the chance to really say what she saw because no one will really listen, including Denise. Like it kind of implies that at a certain point, she didn't get the chance to say, and by the way, if you keep on this path, I'm the one that's going to shoot you in the head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's now you could argue it's like, and I think this is stupid because this is a movie, but like, you could argue she should just yell it to her, be like, by the way, I saw it and I'm shooting you in the head. So let's try to stop that. But, I like the built up suspense. I like the dark irony and the kind of circular nature of it. Well,
and also that Denise honestly kind of treats her the same way she gets treated.
True.
Yeah. Like, it actually, she does kind of go, Carla, you're a fucking crazy ass nerd. I'm not going to, you're some
That's
aging
true.
actress who's drunk. Why should I listen to you? Yeah. And by alienating Carla and like not caring about her until the last possible moment when she's literally the only living person she knows.
Yeah. And I think she's doing that for cope too, because there's all those moments, like I said earlier, where she's like, it's a coincidence. Like she's trying to convince herself. So when she is rude to Carla, I think most of her doesn't even believe what she's saying. She's just like, I need to keep my job. I want my normal life back. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to deny every fucking weird thing that's obviously happening to me.
Yeah, but that's where the cyclical tragedy, I think, of the movie kind of came in, which seems like a weird thing to be saying about a movie that has this poster, but it does have an air of tragedy to the sort of, I guess, the kind of irony, the gruesome irony of this final segment of the movie. But it is like, by Carla being so alone and her not being there to work through that situation with her the way that she was hoping others would for her, it's what gets Carla to kill herself and to slash her own wrists, and which obviously we find out happens off screen. But it leads to a really great moment where she, pulls up to Carla's place. She's like, you're my last resort. Literally everyone around me has turned into a zombie or died. And you even told me that the people who I care about and the people who got in death's way, this is what would happen to them. And I didn't believe you. Now I'm here. And Carla's just sitting there silently on her couch, not talking to her. And Denise is just completely unaware that she has already off-screen committed suicide due to her own alienation and depression about this situation that she's been put in, and these visions she's been having that clearly are more of a curse than they are anything that anyone listens to. Yeah,
they've ruined her life.
So she has been corpseified and zombified, and she literally pulls a gun out and just instantly shoots her. But it's two great images, and one is the close up of the gun in her hand, where you can see her slashed wrist in the frame. It's almost like when James Woods is holding the gun in Videodrome, is like what the framing looks like, but you can just see that she's committed suicide. That's how we get the suicide reveal, which is a great image to do that with. But then also the close up cut to Denise, who is standing next to the phone in the same way she was earlier, kind of once again, it's the same framing and everything of when death was invisible and in her house. And she's like, now it's happening again. But this time it's not the phone rings and she gets scared and she freaks out. She actually just looks at Carla and she kind of smiles and she kind of goes, I'm relenting myself I'm accepting my fate a little bit, and that there is a semblance of it's over, that this horrible existence that I've been going through since I survived, and it's caught up with me, my punishment.
Yeah, and there's also a further dark irony that she's also going to who is she calling specifically? But I'm almost certain she's calling someone to kind of tell them what's going on in some capacity, because it creates that ironic ending that we get that is almost funny in a way. It's creepy and funny just because of the irony of it, where Arthur, the autopsy guy, is, he's taking a phone call, and all the bodies in the morgue are now there and collected, the ones that we've seen.
That is honestly a gag shot, that every single body, like Brian, all Christy, Denise, Carla, and the taxi driver, literally all those bodies dropped in one day. And he's like, okay, maybe something is weird happening in the morgue. Because what the fuck is this all about? And I'm actually, you know what, I'm going to write up on this and I'm going to report this. And as he's saying that, the death raises Christy's body in the background to be like, no, you're not.
And all you hear is the Arthur, and then it just cuts to black. Like, I like that they even add that. They haven't added that the whole movie, but just at the end they add a little camp. I think it fits, to be honest, and I really enjoyed it. And it is creepy. Like, it is genuinely creepy that the last guy that was kind of a part of this, that had some suspicion, is about to get got, and you just assume, now that death has had its fun and done its job, death is going to have fun with the whole world, and the zombie apocalypse is going to happen or something. You can have just fun with your brain and where it goes. But yeah, it's awesome. I love the dark irony of it all. And
yeah, no, this is and once again, Christmas just on the periphery.
Yeah,
but
it's there. It is there.
It's a great excuse. You can recommend it to someone anytime you're like, no one knows this is a Christmas horror film, but technically it is. And, nothing says Christmas vibes like feeling alone and suicidal.
Yeah, like, right? Death is coming. Folks? Death is coming,
everybody.
Death is coming. Merry Christmas.
Zombie Santa's coming for you, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, we're pivoting towards reductive rating on this one, too. This was a solid 4 for me, too. I like this guy. It sucks that he was like, it sounds like he was a bit of a jerk and might have harmed his career, because he was incredibly talented. Mm-hmm. I like his writing. I like his directing. I like his editing, his choice of soundtrack, his choice of style, the way that he blends genres, the way that he, watching this made me appreciate Night of the Comet even more.
Yeah.
Partially because I realized that he can control tone if he wants to.
I see. I had kind of very similar feeling. I almost wish I watched this first, in a sense, just to get. Yeah,
maybe I structured this wrong, and we should have done the reverse. We should have done it in chronological order by 9 months.
It's almost just like, because like you said, this one has such a focused tone to it, that he's so well controlled. And then I think, and eventually you find out that Night of the Comet is really controlled. It's just, it takes like half the movie to get. Excuse me. It takes like half the movie to get there because of all of the tonal whiplashing. But once you realize that he just is doing everything on purpose, you're like, wow, this guy's incredibly talented.
Yeah, no, and for low budget movies, which these both are, I think Soul Survivor was $300,000 and Night of the Comet was $700,000.
$1 million between them. That's nuts, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, he made 2 movies for $1 million
so good,
in the
too.
same year, and they're good. And yeah, I don't know. This was like, he was really good at doing these low budget, genre bending movies set around the Christmas holidays. Both of these, I think, punch above the weight class that you would expect of someone else making them.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is the care and attention to personality and character that he clearly, thinks a lot about, or at least thinks is important, even if a character only has one scene. The sense of, the cool sense of logic, I guess, that he has to his movies, where every detail actually does kind of matter and make sense and add up to something, which is, not necessarily something I need in my movies, but when it's done well, and when it's done well under clear limitations, where I would also wave it away and be like, well, he didn't have time. It's like, this guy put the time in.
Yeah.
Which makes me kind of just appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this one, it's very different than Night of the Comet. It definitely has more of like that, Twilight Zone meets Halloween kind of like, that's how I imagine he pitched it.
It does strangely have like a Christmas / Halloween vibe. Like you feel like you could watch this in both holidays.
Yeah. And I mean, credit, he came up with a great concept for a movie that ended up launching an entire franchise of other people who took it in a different direction. But like, he came up with the Final Destination premise to 15 years before they started making those movies, which is cool. And not only did he do that, he did it in a completely eerie and surreal, slow burn, purgatorial way that reminded me more of other movies that I also really like. Things like Carnival of Souls, which we've done an episode on, Messiah of Evil, which I don't think we've done an episode on, but we did a virtual watch of, which I think is great and reminded me a lot of that movie too. And then I also thought about Dead and Buried as well, maybe just because of the small town like horror thing or zombie thing. Specifically, but yeah, great atmosphere, great editing. The way that he uses all the nightmarish premonitions, and the way that he builds all this like tensely patient, like supernatural, the hand of death, the invisible hand of death is manipulating and gaslighting everything around you and isolating you and making you sad and lonely. And the way that he cares about that emotional experience these characters go through and connects Carla and Denise together in this really sad and tragic and kind of ironic fashion, I think is well thought out and well deployed. And the overall effect of this movie is just, considering the exploitation premise, the exploitation poster, which is through the roof. I imagine people who watched this were probably disappointed that it wasn't trashier when they watched it. It's pretty hypnotic and pretty controlled and pretty gloomy in a way that I found kind of dreamlike and kind of fantastic. Again, the opening premonition airline wreckage carnage stuff is nuts. And the spooky, like cyclical ghost story ending that it is in conversation with is great. And pretty much everything in between, though it's cheap, it's effective. And I liked it a lot. So 4 stars.
Yeah, I'm also gonna 4 it. I think this is awesome. For him to direct, write, and edit this is pretty incredible. It also feels like that, like it's kind of a one vision kind of thing. For as whatever you want to call it, like it is very much a genre movie. This is death after somebody. It's got the Halloween vibe. Movies that I was reminding of, definitely Carnival of Souls, like you said, Halloween. A modern one would be It Follows, but of course It Follows is definitely taking from all of these already. I just mean, just having those long shots hundreds of yards away as it slowly approaches and she's watching it. It's like, that is with the Michael Myers stuff, but a lot of it, I guess, just feels more like with Michael Myers, it's a little bit more stationary in that aspect. And with this, there are those moments where it's like death just slowly gets to you and it's not trying very hard. And even when it does, it's not, it doesn't show a lot of the crazy violence. It kind of cuts away from it a bit and leaves the implication of it. And then I think also having you like it reborn all of your friends and the people to kill you is something that kind of personalizes that a little bit too. It makes it even creepier that it's not just this masked entity or even just death. It's death, but representing people that are in your life coming after you. So I think that there's an element to that that's really interesting. It does give me kind of dreamy Carpenter vibes in certain areas. Almost the way that it's edited and paced in certain parts almost reminded me of like even Prince of Darkness in certain setups of like this kind of rising evil that's coming. And
I see that.
Yeah, and there's also, I like that he kind of evolves death, where like the first time you see the entity or feel the entity, it's just the shadow that kind of crosses her in the hallway, and then it leads up to, you know, her friends being serial killers, basically. So I think that is a really cool evolution as well, as opposed to what they do with Final Destination, where it's just like traps using obstacles around the house, which I do love that to death. But
I was like, fun in its own way, but very different.
Yeah, very different. More just like almost carnival games kind of fun. Whereas this one has a real personal touch that I think creates that kind of dreadful, haunting feeling. So yeah, Eberhardt, really good stuff. I don't like. Does he have? Are these two kind of the big ones, or does he have a couple others that? Like,
dude, well, Captain Ron, Ron, Kurt Russell excellence right there.
Hell yes, I bet. What do we got? Kurt Russell, Martin Short. Okay.
Yeah,
I did hear Without a Clue is
next.
good, but I haven't seen it. So, and that's got Michael Caine, Ben Kingsley. They're good. So yeah.
Oh yeah, as Sherlock Holmes and Watson.
Oh, Holmes. That'd be interesting. So anyway, I think that these two are probably the ones that I would love the most. It seems like those are the two that he really went wild on the genre fair. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to find out of the filmography that I'm looking at here, I don't think I'm going to find two others that I'm going to love as much. Based on
you don't think I Was a Teenage Faust is looking like what you wanted of a movie necessarily?
That poster's looking pretty bad compared to Soul Survivor. I will say that.
Dude, Robert Townsend is in it though. I don't know. We need to investigate. I think
I will. We'll take out the blade if we need to. But no, he's talented. So I feel like even those would probably have some value for sure. I just. I do. It seems interesting that he did these two genre movies in 1 year, and then it seems like he didn't really dive into that again. So,
yeah, not sure what happened there, but thankfully, in the year 1984, he gave us two Christmas genre benders for everyone to enjoy.
Yes,
specifically on their 40th anniversary, which is happening right now by the time you guys are listening to this. So, if you haven't seen them, check them out. If you have seen them, convince a friend to watch them. It's Christmas. Trick them. Come on.
Exactly.
Get them to do
They'll
it.
see the Christmas lights and just accept it, I feel like.
You don't need to watch the live action Grinch again.
No.
Get your little sibling or whatever, your throw on Soul Survivor for him.
Your 10-year-old niece needs to watch Soul Survivor and Night of the Comet, okay?
Yeah.
She needs to feel the vibes of girls just want to have fun in a shopping mall with an Uzi.
That's true. And you know what? We do have the vibes. If you're trying to get like adult family members to watch something, Soul Survivor makes sense. If you're trying to get like a teenage cousin to watch something, Night of the Comet is actually pretty fun. And they might have some campy fun with that.
Yeah, I think it would be a good time. And as soon as, like I said, as soon as they see those Christmas lights, they'll accept that it's a Christmas movie. I feel like people will just be like, okay. And then even if they don't, an hour in, they'll figure it out. And there's only 30 minutes left anyway, so they're going to have to finish it.
Yeah. And then, and by that point, you're like, you know what? Hey, this is just a good movie.
Exactly.
I just like this. So, yeah. But I do think that's going to wrap it up for Soul Survivor and for this week's episode. Once again, that was Night of the Comet from 1984 and Soul Survivor from 1984. This wraps it up for our Christmas Thom Eberhardt double feature. I'm glad that we finally did this. Hope you're all having a wonderful holiday. We are going to be back in 1 week's time where we are actually going to be giving you guys another holiday treat, your patron voted episode. Because if you guys are patrons, and a lot of you are, you know the drill. We have you guys vote for the double feature episode that we talk about. The most upvoted ones get put into a poll, and then we have you guys democratically vote on the episode you want us to cover. I'm letting you all know that because for anyone who isn't a patron listening to this, the next round of double feature nominations usually go up on the week of that episode dropping. So if you have a double feature, now is around the time to start signing up and to try and getting us to talk about what you want us to talk about. And in 1 week's time, we are going to be talking, speaking of all the John Carpenter we mentioned this week, we're going to be talking about John Carpenter. We're going to be talking about Big Trouble in Little China. One. And then two, we're going to be talking about another pod fave, probably on the Mount Rushmore of pod directors, Michael Mann. We're going to be talking about Last of the Mohicans, one of the last ones I think that we haven't got around to doing yet. So we're going to be talking about those two films to kick off 2025 over on the Patreon. That was the episode you guys wanted us to ring in the new year with. And then in 2 weeks' time, it is that time of year again. It's the first main feed episode of the year, which we always try to make the best genre movies of the year. And so we're finally going to be talking about over on the main feed. Jamie and I are going to be getting our list ready, much like Santa himself. And we are going to be counting down our top 10, maybe even once again, top 15, like we did last year. I kind of like doing a top. It went crazy, but I kind of liked being able to fit more movies on the official list. Yeah. Because we have a list that we post on the Letterboxd, and it kind of looks cool when it has more movies in there and some underrated movies in there. So we might end up doing that again, but we're going to be counting down our favorite genre movies that came out in 2024. And if you guys are patrons and have heard a lot of the bonus transmission episodes, some of you probably know what they are. Anyone who's not a patron yet might not. And also, there's always ones that we didn't get around to covering on the bonus transmissions that make the list very sneakily right at the end of the year. You never know. Yep. Jamie and I, at the time of you guys listening to this, we have not seen Nosferatu.
That's right.
Yet,
Big
but
contender.
We are about to part ways for our own holidays and go check it out. I'm sure over the Christmas holidays, and at some point, hopefully we're hoping our boy Eggers delivers and it lands somewhere on that list. So, but yeah. For everyone interested in that, our big gargantuan episode where Jamie and I just try to list every movie that came out in 2024 that we liked, and don't breathe for like 4 hours or drink water. And just shout movies in each other's direction in hopes that some of you discover a movie you didn't see last year.
Yeah, we take off an entire afternoon for that one. And get your watch list ready, because it is a doozy every single year. It's probably at least 20 films every year.
We get a lot of comments from people who say that they really appreciate the fact that we spend half that episode doing honorable mentions and talking about movies that they've literally never heard of. So we will never stop. Yeah. We will do 2 hours of honorable mentions once again, probably, because which is so not what you're supposed to do as a podcast, but it's our personality over here on this show. Yeah. So we've just gotten used to doing it.
We can't help ourselves. Like even when, this episode is about Night of the Comet and look at me, I already do it. Soul Survivor.
We delete them from our brains the second we wrap up the episode.
95 minutes and 85 minutes. And I'm sure this will still be a 2.5 hour episode because we're just nerds. We can't help ourselves. We love cinema, baby.
The movies. So that's what you guys can expect from the show over the next 2 weeks. We will see you guys in 2025. Have a happy holiday and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy and happy holidays, everybody.